Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we aren't starting with kings or empires or glittering treasures. No, we're starting with something far more basic, far more essential. Tonight, we follow a craving. A deep, primal pull that predates cities, predates writing, predates even what we'd recognizably call us. Tonight, we trace the invisible threads of salt, that humble crystal, and see how it quietly held the knife edge between life and death, built civilizations, and shattered thrones. You probably won't survive this journey if we suddenly lost all salt right now. Think about that for a second. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment below. Where are you listening from, and what's the time? Always fascinating to see the map of our sleepless tribe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Right now, you are not in your room. Feel the rough grit of prehistoric soil beneath your bare feet. Smell the damp earth, the musk of animals, the faint metallic tang on the breeze. Hear the distant calls of creatures you instinctively know could end you. You are tired. You are sweating. You just dragged yourself back to your temporary shelter after hours tracking, maybe hunting, maybe just desperately foraging. Your muscles ache, your head pounds, and there's a strange hollowness, a persistent lack deep within you. It's not hunger for meat or berries. It's something else. Something salty. You crave it. Not consciously, not like you crave water when parched. It's deeper, written into the very code of your cells. Your body is a complex, leaky vessel. Every movement, every drop of sweat you wiped from your brow chasing that antelope, or fleeing that saber-tooth, every tear shed in frustration or grief, every time every basic bodily function, it leaks precious sodium. Chloride too. Together, they make salt. And without enough of it, your nerves sputter like a damp campfire. Your muscles refuse to contract properly. Imagine trying to run with legs made of wet clay. Your brain fog rolls in thick, thoughts sluggish, decisions delayed. Your blood pressure plummets. You become weak, dizzy, confused. Death by salt deficiency isn't dramatic. It's a slow, creeping fade into uselessness. You simply stop functioning. One of the most mainstream historical facts we know is that early humans, like all animals, followed their cravings to salt sources, mineral deposits, salt springs, even licking rocks or clay. Survival wasn't just about calories. It was about electrolytes. Your very life depended on finding that next salty fix. Imagine those ancient trails. Not just paths worn by feet seeking water or game, but paths worn by generations of animals, and then early humans, instinctively drawn to places where the earth wept salt. You might stumble upon a muddy patch where deer gathered, their tongues rasping against the mineral-rich soil, a natural salt lick. You join them, not thinking about geopolitics or economics, just obeying the ache in your own body. The taste is sharp, almost shocking at first, flooding your mouth. Then comes relief, a subtle surge of rightness. Strength seeps back into your limbs. Your head clears. That's the sodium ions firing your neurons, balancing your fluids. It feels like magic. It is magic. The magic of basic biology keeping you alive. A quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists believe massive prehistoric salt licks might have acted as natural gathering spots, shaping migration routes for megafauna and potentially influencing where early hominids settled, drawn by the reliable presence of both salt and the animals who sought it. Think of it as the original, involuntary networking event. You don't need a scientist to tell you salt is vital. Your body screams it. That satisfying crunch of perfectly salted food, that's evolution giving you a dopamine high for doing something essential. Your tongue is littered with receptors specifically tuned to savor saltiness, a direct line to your survival instincts. It's why, even today, you can't eat just one potato chip. Your ancient wiring is yelling, more. This is good. Stock up. Because back then, salt wasn't guaranteed. It was a treasure hunt dictated by geography. You lived or died based on proximity to a salt source or the grueling effort required to reach one. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals had more sophisticated salt acquisition methods than early Homo sapiens, or if they simply relied on luck and proximity like other megafauna. The evidence is patchy, like footprints in ancient mud. Did they trade for it? Did they deliberately mine or evaporate brine? Or were they tragically more vulnerable when local sources ran dry? It's a quiet, persistent debate echoing in dusty academic halls. So, as you settle deeper, feeling the faint hum of the fan, the soft darkness, picture that ancient version of you. Not a king, not a warrior, just a creature driven by a fundamental need. You stand by that salty mud, licking your fingers, feeling the vitality return. You don't know it yet, but this simple craving, this white crystal you scrape from the earth, will become the invisible currency of empires. It will dictate where cities rise, spark wars, fund revolutions, and decide who thrives and who withers. It starts here, with this primal taste on your tongue, the first craving that quietly rules the world. The journey of salt, and how it shaped your history, has barely begun. We've just tasted the first grain. Section 2. The relief from that salty mud fades faster than you'd like. That gnawing emptiness returns quicker now. You're not just moving with the seasons anymore, chasing herds or ripe fruit. You've stopped. You've built something, a crude hut, a patch of tamed earth where stubborn grains poke through the soil. Domestication. It sounds grand, like progress. But right now, it feels like a trap. You've domesticated plants, maybe even a few scraggly goats, but you haven't domesticated salt. And that's the problem. Before, when you roamed, salt was a lucky find, a bonus on the trail. Now, rooted to this spot, you realize with a dull thud of dread, salt isn't just a craving anymore, it's a critical supply line you've severed. You've traded nomadic opportunity for agricultural stability, but you've forgotten one vital ingredient. Your sweat still pours in the fields, your body still bleeds sodium, but the ancient salt licks are miles away, beyond hills patrolled by who knows what. You are literally tied to a land that might not give you what you desperately need to live. The hunter has become the hunted, and what you're hunting is salt. So, you organize. Not for war, not yet, but for survival. You gather a small band, the strongest walkers. You point towards the distant haze where, generations past, the elders spoke of the weeping rocks. This isn't a casual forage, it's a calculated expedition, perhaps humanity's first dedicated supply chain. You pack dried meat, skins for water, simple tools. The journey is brutal. Days blur into aching feet, blistered skin under relentless sun, nights spent huddled against predators whose eyes gleam in the firelight. Every step away from your precious fields feels like a gamble. Will the crops survive without you? Will you survive the journey? The mainstream historical fact hits hard. The very act of settling into agricultural communities around 10,000 BCE created the need for organized salt procurement. Villages like Catalhoyuk in Anatolia or the early settlements along the Yellow River weren't just near water and fertile soil. Evidence suggests they were also strategically placed near salt sources or established arduous trade routes to get it. Salt stopped being a fortunate accident and became a logistical headache, a cornerstone of early planning. Forget gold or gems. This white crystal is your community's lifeline. Imagine the trek. You finally reach the place, a cliff face streaked with white, or perhaps a stagnant, briny pool shimmering under the sun. Relief washes over you, stronger than any stream. But it's not enough to just lick the rocks like a deer. You need to take it back. So, you get inventive. Maybe you find salty clay, you scrape it, pack it into lumps. Maybe you find a salt spring, you pour the bitter water into hollowed logs or skins, knowing the precious crystals will form as it evaporates under the journey's sun. It's heavy, awkward. Every extra pound slows you down, makes you vulnerable. A quirky tidbit emerges from the mists of prehistory. Some archaeologists believe the very first containers beyond basic baskets or gourds might have been developed specifically for transporting salt, hardened leather bags, or even early pottery whose fragments show traces of sodium chloride. Think about it. The need to move salt efficiently might have spurred innovation in packaging. Your aching shoulders curse the weight, but history sees the birth of logistics. The return journey is tense. Every rustle in the bushes could be bandits eyeing your precious cargo. Because word gets out. Other settled groups, also salt-starved, also desperate. That salty clay isn't just sustenance, it's potential currency. A fringe theory, debated but fascinating, suggests that before formal grain taxes or labor dues, the earliest forms of tribute or payment within emerging hierarchies might have been measured in salt. Did the guy who organized the successful salt run get an extra share of the harvest? Probably. Did he start expecting it? Almost certainly. Power begins to crystallize around control of the salt supply. Historians still argue fiercely about the exact point where salt transitioned from vital commodity to a tool of social control in these early societies. Was it a gradual creep, or did some clever, slightly ruthless individual near a prime salt source suddenly realize their neighbors had to deal with them? The debate simmers, much like brine over a fire. One thing's clear, settling down didn't just mean planting seeds. It meant planting the seeds of future conflict, all centered on the stuff you're now lugging home on your back. You finally stagger back into your settlement. The welcome isn't just relief, it's reverence. You unload the salt, a gritty, dirty treasure. The community gathers. It's distributed carefully, sparingly. A pinch to flavor the bland grain porridge. A rub on the meat to preserve a precious piece for leaner times. The taste is extraordinary, not just salty, but like life itself returned. You see the strength return to gaunt faces, the spark back in tired eyes. But as you watch the careful rationing, a new thought, cold and calculating, forms. This journey was hell. Next time might be worse. What if we controlled the source? What if we didn't just fetch it, but owned it? The idea of territory shifts. Good land isn't just fertile soil and fresh water anymore. Good land has salt. Or it has the power to take it. The quiet hunter of Section 1, driven by instinct, has evolved. You're now a planner, a logistician, and unwittingly, a pioneer of geopolitics. Salt has forced you to look beyond your hut, beyond your fields, to the distant, mineral-rich hills and the power they hold. The hunt for salt has become the engine of expansion, trade, and eventually, empire. And it all started because you decided to plant a few seeds and stay put. Irony. Thy name is sodium chloride. Section 3. The weight of that salt on your back isn't just physical. It's the dawning weight of value. The careful rationing back in your fledgling settlement wasn't just about survival. It was the first flicker of an economy based on white crystals. Now, fast forward centuries. Feel the shift. The air is hotter, drier. The smell of sun-baked mud brick replaces forest loam. You hear the rhythmic slap of sandals on stone, the lowing of cattle, the distant, rhythmic chants drifting over water. You stand not in a village, but in the shadow of impossible geometry, pyramids clawing at a blistering blue sky. Welcome to the Nile. Welcome to Egypt. And here, salt isn't just valuable. It's divine currency, as crucial as the river's flood. The Pharaoh doesn't just want salt, he is salt. His power flows from controlling it absolutely. Forget the gold glinting on his collar. The real treasure is stored in gritty piles in royal warehouses, guarded like the gods themselves. You need salt? You get it from him, on his terms. And one of his most crucial terms involves not feeding the living, but preserving the dead. Permanently. Picture the scene along the Nile's fertile banks. Life thrives, yes, but death is a constant, intimate companion. And Egyptians had this thing about death. It wasn't an end, but a transition. To navigate it successfully, your earthly vessel, your body, needed to arrive intact in the afterlife. Rotting was not part of the divine itinerary. Enter natron. This wasn't your everyday table salt, but a magical, naturally occurring mixture scooped from dry lake beds in the desert wastes, primarily sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, with some chloride and sulfate salts mixed in. Think of it as the ultimate ancient Egyptian multipurpose cleaner and desiccant. The mainstream historical fact is undeniable and visceral. Natron was the cornerstone of mummification for millennia. Priests, acting as the ultimate embalmers, would carefully remove your internal organs, stored in fancy jars, naturally, then pack your body cavity full of natron. They'd cover the outside too. You'd lie there, buried in this sacred salt, for about 40 days. 40 days of the natron doing its silent, brutal work. It sucked every drop of moisture out of your tissues, halted bacterial decay in its tracks, essentially freeze-drying you for eternity. It wasn't gentle. It shriveled skin, hardened muscle. But it worked. Ramesses II, Seti I, Tutankhamun, their faces, eerily recognizable millennia later, are testaments to salt's preservative power. Pharaohs invested fortunes in securing natron deposits, making its procurement and distribution a state monopoly. Your afterlife literally depended on the pharaoh's salt stash. Now, imagine being one of the workers hauling sacks of this precious, pungent stuff from the distant Wadi Nat run back to the embalming tents near Thebes. The desert heat is a physical blow. The natron dust coats your skin, your lungs, making every breath taste alkaline and harsh. It's brutal, thankless work. But here's a quirky, slightly macabre tidbit. Some Egyptologists believe workers involved in the mummification process, constantly covered in natron dust, might have inadvertently discovered its use as an early form of soap or deodorant. Think about it. Natron is a powerful degreaser and deodorizer. While priests performed the sacred rites covered in ritual purity, the lowly haulers, coated in the stuff, might have noticed their usual grime and sweat smell vanished. Did they start secretly using pinches of natron to wash their own clothes or freshen up after a long, sweaty haul? It's a fringe theory, whispered more than published, but delightfully human. Even in the shadow of eternity, people find practical shortcuts. Imagine complaining about body odor while carting the substance that preserves God's kings. The irony is thick enough to cut with a flint knife. But salt's role in Egypt wasn't just about death. It pulsed through daily life. Fish from the Nile, teeming and vital, were heavily salted to feed the masses and the armies marching into Nubia or Canaan. Leather workers used salt in tanning hides. Temple rituals involved salt as a purifying agent. Salting vegetables wasn't just for taste. It was preservation for lean times. The pharaoh's control was total. Taxes were sometimes paid in salt. Disrupting the natron supply wasn't just an economic hiccup, it was a spiritual catastrophe, threatening the very order of the cosmos. Historians still argue whether the famous workers' village near Deir el-Medina, home to the artisans building the royal tombs, received preferential salt rations as part of their payment. Was salt used as a perk to keep these crucial, skilled laborers happy and working on the pharaoh's eternal resting place? Or were they subject to the same rationing as everyone else, their vital work compensated with grain and onions? The papyrus records are fragmentary, the debate's ongoing. Was salt part of the ancient equivalent of hazard pay for handling natron all day? We may never know for sure, but the image of tomb painters sneaking an extra pinch for their lentils is compelling. So, as you stand there, smelling the natron, the incense, the faint decay masked by the salt's sharpness, you understand the pharaoh's power in a new way. His granaries feed the living, yes, but his natron warehouses guarantee eternity for the elite. He controls the cycle itself. The humble craving that drove you to lick mud has been elevated, ritualized, sanctified. The body of a scribe, a noble, a god-king, packed in salt, becomes an object of reverence, a bridge between worlds. It's a stark reminder, in ancient Egypt, salt didn't just decide who lived comfortably, it decided who lived forever. The white crystals that seasoned your fish also held the key to immortality. That's power distilled. That's brine gold. And it sets a precedent. Controlling salt isn't just about logistics or health anymore. It's about ultimate, unchallengeable authority over both this life and the next. The pharaohs understood. The next empires would learn. The hunt for salt had become a divine mandate, written not just in ledgers, but in the very flesh of the preserved dead. Section 4. The pharaohs' natron warehouses fade like a desert mirage. Now, the ground beneath your feet isn't sun-baked Nile mud, but the rough, uneven stones of a mountain path slick with drizzle. The air is colder, thinner, biting your lungs. You're not in Egypt anymore. You're somewhere in the rugged spine of Europe, or maybe the wind-scoured passes of the Himalayas, or the endless, shifting sands of the Sahara. And you're carrying something far heavier than your pack, blocks of salt, lashed to your back or piled high on the swaying, complaining back of a donkey. This isn't a state-sanctioned haul for the afterlife. This is commerce. Ruthless, risky, and utterly essential. You are walking a Bronze Age salt highway, a treacherous vein of trade where salt isn't just valuable. It moves ounce for ounce like precious metal. Forget coins. Your sweat-soaked tunic holds the real currency. One misstep, one bandit ambush, and your life and your fortune vanish into the mist. Feel the strain in your calves, the ache in your shoulders. Hear the rhythmic crunch of your worn sandals on gravel, the jingle of the donkey's harness, the distant cry of an eagle, or is it a lookout signal? These paths aren't roads. They're scars on the landscape, worn deep by generations of feet driven by salt hunger. Take the Via Salaria, the salt road, snaking from the salt pans of Ostia on the Adriatic coast towards the burgeoning hills of Rome. Or picture the Timbuktu caravan centuries later, thousands of camels laden with salt slabs from the mines of Taudeni, trudging 500 miles across the burning Sahara to trade for West African gold. Or imagine the dizzying trails in the Andes, where llamas bear salt from highland springs down to coastal villages. The mainstream historical fact is stark. Long before empires minted standardized coins, these brutal routes functioned as the arteries of early economies. Salt was the universal solvent, dissolving barriers between cultures, enabling trade on a continental scale. You weren't just carrying seasoning. You were carrying portable wealth, as reliable as silver, as coveted as gold. In ancient Abyssinia, Ethiopia, they literally used bars of rock salt, called a moli, as currency well into the 20th century. You'd break off a piece to buy grain, or offer a whole bar for a cow. Your back is a walking bank vault, vulnerable and exposed. The dangers are relentless. Bandits lurk in every shadowed gorge or dense thicket. They know your cargo's worth. A salt block is easier to fence than a stolen idol. Everyone needs it. Crossing mountain passes means battling blizzards, landslides, and thin air that saps your strength. Desert travel means scorching days that fry your skin, freezing nights that crack it, and sandstorms that scour your eyes and lungs while threatening to bury you and your precious load alive. River crossings. Treacherous currents can snatch your donkey or wash your salt into oblivion in seconds. A quirky, grim tidbit emerges from the annals of fringe history. Some archaeologists studying ancient alpine passes have found evidence suggesting salt traders might have used specially trained dogs, not just donkeys. These weren't fluffy companions. Think massive, shaggy beasts, possibly ancestors of the St. Bernard, bred for strength and endurance in snow. But here's the dark twist. Analysis of bones found near ancient salt storage caves sometimes shows cut marks consistent with butchering. Did desperate traders, trapped by sudden storms or blocked by avalanches, resort to eating their own transport animals, or even their canine haulers? It's a chilling possibility whispered over campfires, a testament to how high the stakes were on the salt trail. Hunger makes you do unthinkable things, even when carrying the very mineral that keeps your nerves firing. And the economics are dizzying. The value isn't fixed. It inflates with every mile, every danger overcome. Salt mined cheaply near the coast might triple or quadruple in value by the time your aching feet deliver it to a salt-starved inland tribe. That block on your back could buy a spear, a basket of olives, or even, in some grim markets, a slave. Historians still argue fiercely about the scale of the salt for slaves trade, particularly across the Sahara. Was salt the primary driver, or just one valuable commodity among many, like cloth or copper, exchanged for human lives? The medieval Arab scholar al-Bakri described caravans from Sijilmasir carrying salt south to the Ghana Empire and returning laden with gold and slaves. But quantifying the salt-specific role versus other goods remains contentious. Was a strong young man worth 10 salt slabs? 20? The ledgers are lost to time, leaving only the chilling echo of equivalence between a life and a mineral. The debate simmers in academic journals, a stark reminder that the salt highways weren't just paths of commerce, but sometimes corridors of profound human suffering. You try not to think about what your cargo might indirectly purchase as you adjust the straps biting into your shoulders. So, you press on. The salt grinds against your skin, a constant, abrasive reminder of its worth. You share wary nods with other traders on the path, competitors, but also comrades in the face of shared peril. There's an unspoken understanding. You trade scraps of information about bandit sightings, safe watering holes, unstable slopes. You might barter a sliver of your salt for some dried meat or a warm place by a communal fire. These fragile alliances are the grease on the axle of the salt trade. You glimpse settlements clinging to the route, rough inns, blacksmiths repairing harnesses, opportunistic merchants selling supplies at inflated prices. These aren't towns. They're way stations born solely from the salt's passage, parasites and symbiotes feeding off the trade. Your journey isn't just moving goods. It's weaving the first threads of interconnectedness, forging links between isolated valleys and distant coasts. The salt on your back is building more than personal wealth. It's laying the literal groundwork for empires that will rise by controlling these vital, treacherous paths. Rome needed the Via Salaria. The kingdoms of West Africa craved the Saharan salt caravans. You, the nameless, sweating trader, stumbling on a mountain path, are the indispensable engine. You carry the crystal that binds the world, one grueling, perilous step at a time. The donkey brays, a harsh sound in the thin air. You adjust your load again, squint at the pass ahead shrouded in cloud, and keep walking. The price of salt is measured not just in gold, but in blisters, fear, and the vast, indifferent landscape swallowing you whole. Section 5. The mountain path finally spits you out onto flatter ground, but the relief is short-lived. The air still tastes of dust, but now it's mixed with the tang of sweat, leather, and something else, the metallic scent of order. Iron discipline. You're not a trader anymore. The rough tunic is gone, replaced by heavy, scratchy wool, layers of linen, and over it all, the unnerving weight of segmented iron armor, larica segmentata. A helmet presses down on your skull, the cheek guards limiting your peripheral vision. In your hand, not salt blocks, but the stout wooden shaft of a pilum, a javelin designed to bend on impact, crippling shields. You are a Roman legionary, and your feet, still aching, now march not for profit, but for empire. And your pay. It isn't coins clinking in a purse. Not yet. Your pay is salt. Literally. They call it your salarium. Forget the modern word salary echoing distantly in your mind. Right here, right now, it means one thing: your ration of vital, life-sustaining salt. Your survival, your very ability to swing a sword tomorrow, hinges on this gritty, precious allotment. Feel the rhythm. Left, right, left, right. The centurion's bark cuts through the column like a whip. Intente. You snap straighter, the armor plates grinding. You're marching on a road, a real road, wide, stone-paved, slicing through the landscape like an arrogant declaration. The Via Appia, the Via Salaria. These aren't just paths, they are the iron ligaments binding Rome's growing body. And why were they built? Sure, for moving legions swiftly, but just as crucially, for hauling salt. Efficiently, cheaply, securely. The salt pans at Ostia, or up the coast, produce mountains of it. Your salarium is part of that flow. The mainstream historical fact is deliciously literal. The Roman state paid its soldiers, particularly in the early Republic and well into the Imperial era, partly or sometimes wholly in salt rations. That's your salarium. It wasn't pocket money, it was biological fuel. Without it, marching 30 miles a day in full kit under the Mediterranean sun would kill you faster than any barbarian spear. Sweat drains your sodium reserves. Salt replenishes them. It keeps your muscles firing, your nerves sharp, your blood pressure stable. A soldier without salt is a statue waiting to crumble. Imagine the distribution. Maybe once a month, the quartermaster calls your century forward. No coins, just a measured scoop of coarse salt poured into your personal container, a small pottery jar or a leather pouch. The weight is reassuring. It's survival condensed. But what do you do with it? You use a pinch to season the relentless, bland pools, the barley gruel that's your staple. You rub it meticulously into strips of pork belly, creating laridum, the salted bacon that's your marching ration, your emergency protein. Without salt, that meat rots in days under the Italian sun. With salt, it lasts weeks, even months. It's the difference between marching on empty and marching with strength. Now, a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists excavating Roman military camps along Hadrian's Wall and the German frontier have found staggering amounts of animal bone fragments, particularly pork. But here's the twist. Many bones show signs of very specific butchery, consistent with efficient salting and drying. Fringe theorists, looking at the sheer scale and the proximity of salt sources, suggest some legions might have run near-industrial scale bacon curing operations right at the frontier forts. Picture it, soldiers doubling as butchers and salters during downtime, turning local pigs into miles of edible, preservable energy. Not exactly the glamorous life of conquest, is it? More like, Hail Caesar, pass the salt pork. A necessary, slightly grubby reality behind the gleaming helmets. But salt isn't just for your stomach. It's medicine. You take a nasty gash on your forearm from a training accident. The medicus cleans it with vinegar, that eye-watering sting, and then, before stitching, he might pack it with salt. It burns like Hades itself is licking your wound. You grit your teeth, sweat pouring. It's crude, brutal infection control, based on the simple principle that bacteria hate hypersalty environments as much as you hate ghouls. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread official policy or just battlefield expediency passed down through generations of grizzled veterans. Was salt a standard part of the legionary medical kit, or did soldiers rely on folk remedies and hope? The medical texts are ambiguous. The archaeological evidence for standardized medical salt use is patchy. Did the salt ration double as a wound treatment reserve? The debate rages in scholarly footnotes. One thing's certain, you'd endure the agony, because infection in a marching camp is a slower, more terrifying death than any sword thrust. Salt stings, but it saves. That pouch at your belt, holding your salarium, is more valuable than it seems. Coins eventually became the standard pay, yes, but the principle remained. Your worth was measured, fundamentally, in salt. The phrase "worth his salt" isn't just an idiom. It's a Roman reality. If you shirked, if you broke ranks, if you failed, your salarium could be reduced or withheld. It was leverage. Biological leverage. Your centurion controls your salt, controls your body's ability to function. It's a subtle, profound power. You glance at the new recruit, pale and stumbling under his pack. Is he worth his salt? Time will tell. Probably after he vomits his first mile on the Via Flaminia. You adjust your own pack, feeling the familiar ache. The salt ration allows Rome to project power further, longer, harder than anyone else. You march on roads built for salt, eat food preserved by salt, heal wounds, sort of, with salt. Your very pay is salt. The empire runs on it. That craving that drove ancient hunters to mud licks? The Roman state has industrialized it, weaponized it, turned it into the metabolic engine of conquest. You are that engine. One heavy, sandaled step at a time. The column snakes onward, a machine fueled by brine and iron will. The salarium in your pouch isn't just payment. It's the taste of Rome's relentless, salty ambition. Next stop, the edges of the known world. Bring your own salt. Section 6. That rhythmic crunch of your sandals on the Via Appia isn't just the sound of marching. It's the sound of empire being cemented, one precisely laid stone at a time. The road stretches ahead, ruler straight, cutting through forests, bridging marshes, ignoring hills with arrogant viaducts. It feels eternal. But you know better. You remember the muddy tracks, the bandit-haunted paths of earlier sections. This is different. This is control. And the reason this road exists, the real reason, isn't just to move legions like yours swiftly to crush rebellions. It's to move salt. Cheaply, quickly, safely. This stone spine you march on? It's Rome's salty nervous system, and without it, the sprawling body of the empire would seize up and die. You're not just a soldier. You're a corpuscle pumping vital brine through the veins of the world's first superpower. Feel the sheer effort baked into these stones. Imagine the crews that built it, slaves, convicts, local conscripts driven harder than your pack mule. They leveled the earth, dug deep foundations, hauled massive slabs, cemented them with mortar mixed with, you guessed it, sometimes pulverized brick and volcanic ash, but often sand and gravel scavenged from riverbeds. The smell is overwhelming. Sweat, wet earth, crushed stone, and the acrid tang of hot pitch used to seal joints against rain. This road isn't a convenience. It's an economic weapon. Before its construction, salt from the coastal pans at Ostia trickled inland slowly, expensively, vulnerable to theft and spoilage. Prices soared the further you got from the sea. But now, wagons rumble along this engineered marvel, pulled by oxen straining against yokes, piled high with sacks of coarse grey salt. The cost per mile plummets. Suddenly, salt isn't just for soldiers or the rich in Rome. It floods markets in Umbria, Etruria, even distant Cisalpine Gaul. The mainstream historical fact is undeniable. Roman roads, especially key arteries like the Via Salaria, Salt Road, and Via Appia, were explicitly designed and prioritized to facilitate the mass movement of essential commodities, with salt sitting near the top of the list. Efficiency equals control. Control equals power. Think about the scale. Salt isn't just for seasoning anymore. It's preserving the mountains of fish hauled from the Mediterranean to feed Rome's million-plus mouths. Garum factories stink up entire coastlines, reliant on vast salt inputs. It's tanning the hides for the army's tents, boots, and harnesses. It's feeding the livestock that supply cheese and meat. And crucially, it's preserving the grain itself in state granaries, the Horia, stacked like defensive fortresses along the Tiber. A bad harvest in Egypt? No problem. Grain ships sail from Ostia, their cargo preserved by salt, thanks to the roads that brought that salt efficiently from the pans to the port. The empire's resilience hinges on salt-preserved surplus. Here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists studying ancient Roman trash heaps, middens, near major roads have found surprisingly high concentrations of salt scrapings, the crusty residue left in empty transport sacks or storage containers. Fringe theorists suggest this wasn't just waste, but potentially collected and reused by the very poorest, maybe even sold by enterprising beggars as recycled salt for the truly desperate. Picture a gaunt figure by the roadside, offering small, dirty packets of scraped salt crystals for a copper coin. Was Roman salt ever truly wasted? Probably not. Even the dregs had value in an empire running on brine. But control breeds temptation. Smuggling salt becomes a high-stakes game. The Roman state, understanding salt's vital role, often imposed monopolies or heavy taxes on its production and transport. Avoid those taxes, and you could make a fortune. So, imagine clever merchants with false-bottomed wagons, hiding salt under legitimate cargo. Or donkey trains taking moonlit day tours off the main road, guided by bribed lookouts. Or corrupt customs officials at city gates, turning a blind eye for a cut of the profits. Historians still argue fiercely about how effective the Roman state actually was at enforcing its salt monopolies across such a vast territory. Was smuggling rampant? a constant drain on the treasury, or was the system relatively watertight thanks to ruthless penalties and a pervasive bureaucracy? Evidence is patchy. Some provincial records show meticulous salt accounting, others hint at widespread evasion. Did the infamous Roman tax collectors, the publicani, squeeze the salt trade dry, or was there always a vibrant black market operating just beneath the paved surface? The debate continues, much like the endless flow of wagons. One thing's certain, where there's valuable salt and heavy taxes, someone will find a way to cheat. You see it all as you march. The way stations, mutations, every 10 miles or so, bustling hubs where drivers swap tired oxen for fresh ones, grab a quick meal of salted fish and bread, and exchange gossip, including where the patrols are thickest. The roadside inns, mansions, offering safer, but pricier, overnight stops for valuable salt caravans. The small villages that spring up near particularly good springs or minor salt deposits, feeding off the road's traffic. This engineered path isn't sterile. It pulses with life, commerce, and constant, low-level chicanery. The salt flowing down it lubricates everything. It allows Rome to project power deep inland, supporting legions stationed on distant frontiers like Britannia or the Rhine. It stabilizes prices, somewhat, feeds the masses, and fuels industries. The road binds disparate provinces together economically long before they truly feel Roman. Without these salty highways, the empire remains a fragile collection of coastal city-states. With them, it becomes an interconnected organism. So, as your century halts for a brief rest, the centurion barking orders to check gear, you lean against a mile marker carved with the distance to Rome. You feel the solidity of the stone, the legacy of immense labor. You smell the dust kicked up by a passing salt wagon, the familiar tang cutting through the scent of leather and sweat. This road, this marvel of engineering you take for granted, exists because of a simple crystal. It carries the lifeblood of the empire. You adjust your helmet, the salarium pouch a comforting weight at your belt. You are part of the machine, marching on the salty spine that holds the world together. The road stretches on, a pale ribbon under the sun, carrying its gritty treasure ever forward. The empire marches on salt. And you, legionary, are worth yours. Now, fall in. The next mile won't march itself. Left, right, left, right. The rhythm resumes, echoing off the stones that salt built. Section 7. That reassuring weight of your salarium pouch? It's just the visible tip of an iceberg, a very salty iceberg. Because while you march, fueled by your ration, the empire you serve is engaged in a colossal, invisible act of defiance against time itself. It's preserving, on a scale that would make your head spin. Forget your little strip of salted bacon. Picture mountains of gleaming sardines hauled from the teeming Mediterranean, vast shoals transformed into shimmering silver hills on the docks of Ostia or Neapolis. Now, picture armies of workers, hands raw and stinging, packing these fish layer upon layer into gigantic clay jars, dolia, each layer buried under a thick blanket of coarse salt. The air reeks, a pungent cocktail of sea brine, fish guts, and the sharp, clean tang of the preservative. This isn't just lunch prep, it's industrial-scale time travel. Salt is stopping decay in its tracks, bottling the bounty of the sea for the future. The mainstream historical fact is staggering. Rome consumed millions of tons of salt-preserved fish annually. The production of garum, that infamous fermented fish sauce beloved by Romans, and reviled by pretty much everyone else, alone required astronomical quantities of salt. Without this salted larder, Rome starves. Your legion starves. The empire grinds to a halt. Feel the sheer logistics of it. Salt isn't just sprinkled on, it's piled in. For fish, for meats, for olives, even for some vegetables. State granaries, the horia, aren't just storing grain. They're carefully layering it with salt to ward off weevils and rot, ensuring that when the Nile floods fail or Gaul has a bad harvest, Rome doesn't panic. Well, panics less. It's the empire's biological safety net, and it directly enables you, legionary, standing guard on some mist-shrouded frontier in Britannia. How do you think that shipment of hardtack and salted pork belly got to you? It sailed from Ostia, preserved by salt loaded onto ships whose timbers were also preserved by salt-driven tar production, sailing on routes secured by a navy whose sailors ate salted rations. The entire machine is permeated with brine. Your ability to stand firm against painted picks hinges on salt harvested months ago, hundreds of miles away. It's a chain of preservation stretching across sea and land, all leading to your growling stomach on a damp British rampart. Salt isn't just in the empire, it is the empire's resilience. Now, imagine the scene at a major salt pan. Not the small coastal operation, but a state-run behemoth. Slaves or contracted workers wade through shallow, evaporating ponds under relentless sun, raking the forming crystals. Overseers watch, tallying output on wax tablets. Guards patrol the perimeter. This isn't just production. It's a strategic resource under lock and key. Here's a quirky, slightly grotesque tidbit. The Roman elite had a taste for the exotic, and salt played a role even here. Historical gossip, recorded by folks like Pliny the Elder, whispers of extravagant dishes like salted ostrich tongues or flamingo tongues, preserved in salt and honey, shipped from the edges of the empire to grace the tables of bored patricians in Rome. Think about the journey. A hunter in Africa bags a flamingo, extracts the tongue, packs it in salt. It travels by cart, then ship, passing through countless hands, preserved against decay by those humble crystals, only to be consumed in a single, decadent bite by a senator complaining about the plebs. The sheer absurdity of the salt's journey for such a tiny, luxurious morsel highlights the mineral's pervasive power. Salt preserved the legion's bacon and the senator's flamingo tongue snack. But the state doesn't just produce salt, it controls it. Monopolies are common. Taxes are heavy. The gabelle, a term we'll hear screaming later in France, has its roots here. Why? Because controlling salt means controlling life. It means controlling the food supply. It means controlling the army's logistics. It means controlling the purse strings. Salt taxes fill the imperial coffers, funding more roads, more legions, more aqueducts. It's a source of immense, quiet power. Historians still argue fiercely about how centralized this control truly was across the vast empire. Did the emperor in Rome micromanage every salt pan from Hispania to Egypt? Or was it delegated to provincial governors, leading to vast discrepancies in price, availability, and state profit? Was there a salt ministry buried deep within the Palatine bureaucracy, or was it handled ad hoc? The evidence is fragmented. Some provincial inscriptions detail strict salt regulations and taxes. Others suggest local elites controlled production with minimal imperial oversight. Was salt policy uniform, or a messy patchwork reflecting Rome's often pragmatic, sometimes chaotic, administration? The debate simmers, much like brine in a shallow pan under the Mediterranean sun. One thing's clear, whether directly or indirectly, the state's hand was heavy on the salt trade. So, as you gnaw your laridum on that rainy British wall, think beyond the taste. That salt on your pork is imperial power crystallized. It represents the conquered salt pans, the back-breaking labor of the rakers, the efficiency of the roads and ships that brought it, the tax collectors who skimmed their share, the bureaucrats who tracked it, and the sheer logistical genius, or brute force, that turned a biological necessity into the glue holding a continent-spanning empire together. The Picts in the mist might have courage, they might have ferocity, but they don't have this. They don't have the salted reserves, the preserved supply lines, the industrial-scale defiance of decay that allows Rome to project power year-round across impossible distances. Your strength, legionary, comes from the point of your gladius, yes. But it also comes from the salt preserving the food in your belly and the empire at your back. It's the taste of control, of foresight, of an empire betting its survival on the humble power of a crystal to stop time. The craving that began in the mud is now the silent engine of dominion. The barbarians have passion. Rome has pickled fish. Place your bets. Section 8. The solid Roman road beneath your feet crumbles into mud. The disciplined rhythm of the legion fades, replaced by the chaotic clangor of a world fracturing. The empire's salty spine has snapped. That reassuring flow of preserved fish, grain, and bacon? Gone, choked off by crumbling infrastructure, barbarian incursions, and the sheer, grinding weight of time. The stone bridges collapse. The horia stand empty and echoing. The complex salt tax bureaucracy evaporates like brine under a hot sun. You're not a legionary anymore. You're a peasant. Your world has shrunk drastically. You huddle in a wattle and daub hut within the wooden palisade of your lord's manor, the smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and unwashed bodies thick in the air. Outside, your meager strip of land yields just enough to keep you breathing, barely. And salt? That vital crystal that powered an empire. It's become rarer than hen's teeth, more precious than silver. It's not just a seasoning, it's white gold. And your lord controls it absolutely. Your life, quite literally, is measured in his salt cellar. Feel the gnawing, familiar emptiness return. Not just hunger for bread, but that deeper, cellular ache for sodium. You sweat in the fields, tilling the heavy soil, your body leaking precious electrolytes. Winter is coming. The meager harvest, a few sacks of grain, some turnips, maybe a scrawny chicken, needs preserving. Without salt, it rots. Without salt, you weaken. Your lord knows this. His stone keep, looming on the hill, isn't just a symbol of power. It's often the fortress guarding the only reliable salt source for miles. Maybe it's a modest salt spring bubbling up on his domain. Maybe he controls the rights to a distant mine, or has the wealth to import pitifully expensive blocks from coastal producers via treacherous, diminished trade routes. The mainstream historical fact is brutal. In the fragmented feudal world after Rome's fall, control of salt became a primary source of seigneurial power. Your lord doesn't just demand a share of your grain or your labor. He demands salt dues, or worse, forces you to buy your salt only from him, at prices he sets. It's a monopoly on life itself. The Domesday Book, William the Conqueror's Great Survey of England in 1086, meticulously records salt pans and salt works as valuable assets, their output controlled and taxed by the new Norman lords. Your survival hinges on his whim. Imagine the salt distribution day. It's not a ration, it's a transaction, often a humiliating one. You shuffle forward in the muddy bailey beneath the lord's stern gaze, or his steward's bored sneer. You present your meager coins, or more likely, a portion of your harvest, a chicken, a day of your son's labor. In return, you receive a small, carefully measured cone of grey salt, poured from the lord's large storage chest. The steward's fingers might linger, ensuring not an extra grain spills. The weight in your hand feels pitifully small against what you surrendered. That salt must preserve your winter cabbage, flavor your gruel, keep your family's strength up through the dark months. One bad calculation, one harsh winter, one unfair price hike from the Lord, and weakness sets in. Your muscles tire faster. Your head feels foggy. You become susceptible to every chill that sweeps through the cramped village. Salt deficiency isn't a quick killer. It's a slow, insidious drainer of vitality, making you less able to work, less able to resist disease, less able to survive. Your lord's power isn't just in his knights. It's in the salt that keeps you just functional enough to serve him. Here's a quirky, dark tidbit. Some medieval manorial records, particularly from isolated regions in France and Germany, hint at lords employing salt spies, villagers encouraged to report neighbors who might be hoarding salt, buying it illicitly from traveling peddlers, or even attempting to evaporate their own brine from forbidden springs. Betray your neighbor for an extra ounce of the white stuff? In a world of scarcity, the temptation was real. Community bonds frayed under the weight of salt hunger. But salt wasn't just for food. Think about the manor itself. The lords prized hunting hounds. Their meat was salted for winter feeding. Leather for harnesses, saddles, and boots required salt in the tanning process. Even basic construction sometimes used salt to help preserve wood against rot. Salt was woven into the very fabric of daily survival on multiple levels. Historians still argue fiercely about how deliberately oppressive the salt monopolies were. Was the high price and scarcity simply a result of fragmented logistics and danger? Or was it a calculated feudal strategy to bind peasants more tightly to the land and the lord's control? Did lords actively create salt scarcity to enhance their power? Or were they merely the inevitable beneficiaries of a broken system? The evidence is complex. Some charters show lords granting specific salt rights to monasteries or towns as acts of piety or patronage, suggesting some flexibility. Others reveal brutal crackdowns on unauthorized salt trading. Was it systemic exploitation or chaotic opportunism? The debate grinds on in academic mills, finer than any peasant's flour. One thing is undeniable. The salt cellar in the Lord's Hall wasn't just a condiment holder. It was a tool of domination as potent as the dungeon beneath his keep. So, as you clutch your tiny cone of salt, trudging back to your smoky hut, the weight is immense. It represents hours of back-breaking labor traded away. It represents your family's fragile health through the coming frosts. It represents your utter dependence. The craving that drove ancient hunters, that fueled Roman legions, has become your chain. The Lord's control over this simple mineral gives him power over your body, your labor, your very lifespan. You glance up at the forbidding keep. Its strength isn't just in stone walls and men-at-arms. It's in the guarded stores of white crystals within. Salt preserved empires. Now, in this shrunken world, it preserves the feudal order. Your life is measured not in years, but in the grudgingly given grains of your lord's white gold. You need it to live. He knows it. And that knowledge is the bedrock of his power over you. The empire of salt has fragmented into 1,000 petty tyrannies, each centered on a guarded salt cellar. The taste on your tongue is no longer just life, it's subjugation. Section 9. The damp chill of the manor bailey fades, replaced by a different kind of dampness, salt-laden, briny, alive. The oppressive smell of mud and wood smoke gives way to the tang of seaweed, fish, tar, and something sharper, cleaner, vast quantities of drying salt. The ground beneath your feet isn't packed earth, it's the gently rocking deck of a Venetian galley. You're not a serf clutching a meager cone. You're a sailor, a merchant, part of the most audacious commercial empire medieval Europe ever saw. And its foundation isn't gold or land. It's the shimmering white crystals piled high in the hold beneath your feet. Welcome to the Republic of Venice, where salt isn't just traded. It's the very water the serene Republic swims in. Forget feudal lords hoarding springs. Here, they monopolize entire seas. Feel the movement. The sleek galley slices through the turquoise waters of the Adriatic, oars dipping in near-perfect unison. Above you, a lateen sail snaps taut in the breeze. Ahead, the impossible skyline of Venice rises from the lagoon like a mirage, a forest of bell towers, domes, and palaces, all seemingly floating. The air hums with the cries of gulls, the shouts of dockworkers, the rhythmic clang of shipbuilders' hammers. And underlying it all, the scent. Not just sea air, but the concentrated, almost metallic aroma of salt. It drifts from the lagoon's edge where shallow evaporation pans bake under the sun, tended by workers raking the forming crystals. It wafts from warehouses lining the Grand Canal, stacked high with sacks destined for the heart of Europe. Venice doesn't just have salt, Venice is salt. The mainstream historical fact is breathtakingly simple and devastatingly effective. By the 13th century, the Venetian state had established a ruthless monopoly over salt production and trade throughout the Mediterranean. They didn't just sell salt, they forced the world to buy it from them on their terms. It was the original cornering the market, played out with galleys and galley slaves. How did they do it? First, they exploited their unique geography. Their lagoon offered natural salt pans. But ambition quickly outstripped nature. Venice used its growing naval power to seize control of prime salt-producing regions. Servia on the Italian coast, the salt pans of Cyprus after conquering the island in the late 12th century, crucial sites in Crete, and eventually, saltworks as far away as the Black Sea. They didn't just own the pans, they dictated the price, the quantity, and the routes. Picture the system. Every merchant ship entering or leaving Venice had to carry a mandatory quantity of state salt as ballast. Think of it, tons of salt, bought from the state at fixed prices, weighing down every vessel, whether the merchant wanted it or not. This guaranteed a massive, captive market. They'd force cities like Milan, desperate for salt to preserve food for their growing populations, to sign exclusive contracts. Break the contract, face a Venetian embargo, or worse, Venetian warships blockading your ports. Salt wasn't just a commodity, it was geopolitical leverage, wielded with cold, calculating precision. Your galley isn't just carrying cargo, it's carrying the instrument of Venetian domination. Here's a quirky tidbit. Venetian salt merchants, known for their sharp practices, supposedly developed an early form of insider trading. They employed networks of fast courier boats, faster than the official state galleys, to race ahead of the main salt fleets, carrying news of harvest yields, prices, and political instability. Arriving first in key ports like Constantinople or Alexandria, they could buy up local salt cheaply before the official Venetian price was announced, or sell Venetian salt at inflated prices based on manipulated scarcity rumors. Think medieval pump-and-dump schemes, fueled by brine and ruthless ambition. Sharp as a stiletto, these guys. The wealth generated was obscene. Look around at those emerging palaces lining the canals, the Cia d'Oro, the foundations of the Doge's palace being expanded. The marble, the gold leaf, the masterpieces by Bellini or Titian beginning to grace the walls. Paid for by salt. The mighty Venetian arsenal, the most advanced shipyard in the world, churning out galley after galley to protect the salt routes. Funded by salt. The Republic's lavish festivals, its intricate spy network, its bribes to foreign princes. Salt, salt, salt. It was the ultimate cash cow, milked dry by a state that understood the addictive, non-negotiable nature of its product. Historians still argue fiercely about the precise percentage of Venetian state revenue derived directly from the salt monopoly at its peak. Was it 30%, 40%, or even higher? Venetian financial records are notoriously complex and sometimes opaque. Did other lucrative trades like spices or silk eventually surpass salt? Or did salt remain the bedrock, the reliable torrent of wealth that underpinned everything else? The debate rages in musty archives, a testament to just how fundamental this white crystal was to La Serenissimi's golden age. Was Venice built on spice dreams or salt realities? The ledgers whisper, but don't always tell. But feel the tension beneath the glittering surface. The salt monopoly bred resentment. Rivals like Genoa fought bloody naval wars for control of key salt-producing islands. Coastal communities whose ancestral salt pans were seized by Venice seethed. Smugglers risked everything to run Venetian blockades, carrying cheaper salt from uncontrolled sources. Even within Venice, the state's iron grip could chafe. Merchants grumbled about the forced ballast, the fixed prices that sometimes ate into profits on other goods. The Salt Office, the Magistrato ul Sal, with its vast bureaucracy and network of informers, was powerful and often feared. It was a system built on control, and control is always fragile. Yet, for centuries, it held. Your galley sails past the Lido, laden with Cypriot salt, bound for the Rialto market. You see the wealth, the power, the sheer arrogance of a city-state that turned a basic biological need into an empire. The feudal lord's guarded salt cellar seems pathetic now. Venice didn't just own the salt, they owned the sea lanes it traveled, the markets it supplied, and the economies it sustained. The craving that bound peasants to the land now bound continents to a single, shimmering city in a lagoon. The taste of power is no longer earthy or metallic. It's the pure, sharp tang of Mediterranean brine, concentrated into unimaginable wealth. Venice floats on salt. And for now, the world pays the price. Next stop, the Rialto, where fortunes are weighed not in gold, but in sacks of white crystals. Mind your step, it's slippery when wet with ambition and seawater. Section 10. The shimmering mirage of Venice, floating on salt wealth, dissolves like mist. The Adriatic turquoise darkens to the moody greys and greens of the French countryside. The tang of brine is replaced by the smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and a new, pervasive scent: fear. Not fear of bandits or barbarians, but fear of the taxman. Specifically, the gay blue, the dreaded salt tax collector. Because here, in the Kingdom of France, salt isn't just a commodity, it's a state-sponsored trap. A biological necessity twisted into an instrument of oppression so systematic, so cruel, it turns ordinary peasants into criminals just for trying to stay alive. The gabelle. The word itself tastes bitter, like ashes on your tongue. Forget Venetian merchant princes. Here, the king is your salt lord, and his tax is a knife at your throat. You are no longer a Venetian sailor. You're Jacques, a dirt-poor peasant in, say, the Pays de Grande Gabelle, the region subjected to the heaviest salt tax. Your world is your tiny plot, your thatched hovel, your rickety fence. Winter is a constant, gnawing threat. Preserving your meager cabbage harvest, your single precious ham from the scrawny family pig, is the difference between survival and starvation. You need salt, but getting it legally, that's where the trap snaps shut. The mainstream historical fact is brutal and undeniable. Established in the mid-14th century and refined into a monstrously complex system by the 17th, the gabelle was a state monopoly on salt. You had to buy your annual minimum quota of salt, the devoir de sale, from royal warehouses, at prices fixed by the crown, prices often 6, 10, even 30 times higher than salt cost just across the border in regions with lower taxes or none at all. Refuse? You faced crippling fines. Avoid it? You became an outlaw. Imagine the salt distribution day in your village. It's not a market, it's a forced extraction. The Royal Salt Warehouse, Granier Sale, looms, a fortified symbol of oppression. You shuffle forward in a sullen line with your neighbors. The air is thick with resentment and the sharp smell of the coarse grey salt piled inside. The clerk, a petty official swollen with borrowed power, checks your family size against the rolls. You are assigned your devoir, say, 7 kilograms per person per year, far more than you might actually need for basic preservation, but you must buy it. You hand over precious coins, perhaps the savings from selling a chicken or a day's labor. The salt is weighed on scales you suspect are rigged, poured grudgingly into your sack. The price is extortionate. This salt isn't for seasoning. It's a ransom paid to the crown for the privilege of not letting your food rot, and yourself along with it. The weight in your sack feels like chains. Here's a quirky, darkly ingenious tidbit. Desperate peasants became masters of salt smuggling. They hollowed out loaves of bread, stuffed them with salt, and carried them openly. They sewed salt into the linings of coats or the stuffing of mattresses. Some even fashioned fake pregnant bellies or hid salt in coffins during fake funerals. One particularly bold method involved training dogs to carry hidden packets of salt across fields and woods, evading the patrols. Think of it, man's best friend, running contraband life crystals. The lengths people went to highlight the sheer, desperate absurdity of criminalizing a fundamental need. The gabellous are everywhere. Royal salt tax patrols prowl the roads, bristling with weapons and legal authority. They stop carts, search homes, often violently, demand receipts. If they find untaxed salt, faux sale, the penalties are draconian. Fines you can't possibly pay. Confiscation of your livestock or tools. Public floggings. For repeat offenders or larger smugglers, faux souvenirs, the dreaded punishment was the galleys, a slow, brutal death sentence rowing warships. Imagine being chained to an oar for years because you needed salt to keep your children fed through winter. The injustice curdles in your gut. Historians still argue fiercely about whether the gabelle was primarily a fiscal necessity for the crown, funding endless wars and Versailles glitter, or a deliberate tool of social control. Did the monarchy rely on its revenue, knowing it was deeply unpopular but financially crucial? Or was it also a way to keep the peasantry exhausted, impoverished, and focused on survival rather than rebellion? Was the system's notorious complexity and regional inequality, some provinces were exempt, designed to divide and conquer? The debate simmers, mirroring the resentment that boiled for centuries. Was the king merely greedy, or actively malicious. The archives offer numbers, but the motives remain murky, stained with the salt tears of millions. Life becomes a constant, low-grade terror. You hide your precious legal salt deep in the thatch, fearing thieves and taxmen alike. You eye your neighbors with suspicion. Could they be informers, tempted by the bounty paid for turning in salt smugglers? Trust frays like rotten rope. Even using your own salt becomes fraught. The gabelle regulations sometimes dictated how you could use the salt you were forced to buy. Using it for preserving animal feed instead of human food? Potentially illegal. Selling a pinch to a sick neighbor? Smuggling. The state's tentacles reached into your larder, your cooking pot, your very body's needs. The salt that should symbolize life and preservation becomes a symbol of tyranny, a constant reminder of your powerlessness. That metallic taste on your winter cabbage? It's the taste of royal extortion. So, as you stir your meager, salty pottage over the fire, the bitterness isn't just from the turnips. It's the taste of the gabelle. The craving that built Venice and bound feudal serfs now fuels a deep, smoldering rage in the French countryside. Every overpriced grain, every patrol on the horizon, every story of a neighbor dragged off to the galleys is a spark. The king sits in Versailles, oblivious, surrounded by gilded splendor paid for by your salt tears. He controls the salt, believing it controls you. But this tax, this monstrous perversion of a basic need, is forging something dangerous. A shared sense of injustice, a collective desperation. The white gold that preserved empires is now preserving the fuse of revolution. You need salt to live. The king makes you a criminal for it. That's not just a tax, it's a death warrant for the old regime. One spark, Jacques. Just one spark, and the whole rotten, salty edifice might go up in flames. For now, you eat your bitter soup and wait. Section 11. That bitter taste of the gabelle in your thin soup doesn't just curdle in your stomach. It curdles into something darker, harder. Resignation gives way to a low, simmering rage. The whispers in the tavern grow louder, angrier. Stories circulate like poison. Old man Du Bois dragged off to the galleys for hiding a sack of salt his grandchildren needed. Marie Lefevre flogged in the market square for selling a jug of brine. The gabellus growing fatter while your children grow thinner. The injustice isn't just felt, it's a physical weight heavier than the stones you break in the fields. It's a pressure building, like water behind a rotten dam. And finally, it bursts. You aren't just Jacques the peasant anymore. You are Jacques the furious, Jacques the desperate. You grab whatever lies close to hand, a scythe, a rusted axe handle, a simple wooden pitchfork. Tonight, you don't shuffle to the grainier sail, you march against it. This is the revolt of the saltless. The gabelle has lit the fuse. Feel the raw, chaotic energy crackling in the village square. Torches spit and flare, casting wild, dancing shadows on faces contorted by years of pent-up fury. The air reeks of smoke, unwashed bodies, fear, and something else, liberation. You're surrounded not by fellow sufferers, but by an army of the desperate. Farmers, artisans, laborious, all united by the shared chains of the salt tax. The plan is simple, born of pure hatred. Find the grainier sail, find the gabellus. Destroy the symbols of their oppression. The mainstream historical fact echoes through the centuries. Salt tax revolts erupted across France for over 400 years, peaking in violence during the 16th and 17th centuries. The Croquant revolts in Périgord and Quercy, 1590s, the Enupides, Barefoot, rebellion in Normandy, 1639, countless smaller uprisings, all ignited by the unbearable weight of the gabelle. This wasn't political ideology. It was biological necessity exploding into violence. Your hunger for salt has become a hunger for justice, or at least for survival. You surge through the narrow streets, a human tide. Windows shutter tight. The few who might sympathize with the crown cower indoors. Your target looms ahead, the squat, fortified Royal Salt Warehouse. Its heavy door is barred, but your rage is a battering ram. Logs are heaved against it. Stones fly, smashing shuttered windows. A cheer erupts as the wood splinters, giving way. You pour inside. The smell hits you first, that sharp, clean tang of salt, piled high in sacks. It's infuriating. So much wealth, hoarded, used to bleed you dry. You don't just take it, you destroy it. Sacks are ripped open, precious white crystals spilling onto the filthy floor, trampled under angry feet. Barrels of brine are overturned, flooding the stones. It's vandalism born of pure, desperate symbolism. You're not stealing salt, you're annihilating the tax itself, grain by cursed grain. Here's a quirky, grimly practical tidbit. Chroniclers reported rebels sometimes didn't just destroy the salt, they weaponized it. They forced captured gabblers to eat massive amounts of salt until they became violently ill or worse. It was brutal poetic justice, making the enforcers choke on the very substance they used to choke the people. A harsh, visceral reminder of the tax's cruelty. But the grainy isn't enough. Where are the tax collectors? The hated gabblers? Word spreads, they fled, hiding like rats. The hunt begins. Villages turn inwards, neighbors pointing fingers, old grudges mixed with revolutionary fervor. Imagine the scene, a terrified gay blue, disguised in peasant rags, cowering in a hayloft, his expensive clothes and telltale ledger hidden beneath straw. His found. Dragged out. The mob's roar is terrifying. Historians still argue fiercely about the leadership and organization of these salt revolts. Were they truly spontaneous eruptions of rage, or were there hidden leaders, perhaps disgruntled minor nobles, or even cunning smugglers, directing the fury for their own ends? Did the rebels have coherent demands beyond end the gabelle, or was it pure, destructive catharsis? The fragmented records offer glimpses. Lists of grievances sometimes included other taxes or feudal dues, but salt was always the spark. Was this class war ignited by salt? Or was salt the perfect fuel for deeper, older resentments? The debate churns, as murky as the motives of the mob itself. One thing is clear, the state saw it as pure banditry and reacted with savage reprisals. And reprisal comes. It always does. The distant drumbeat you feared becomes thunder. Royal troops, professional soldiers in gleaming breastplates, march into your village. Their discipline is terrifying against your spent fury. The brief euphoria of the riot evaporates, replaced by cold dread. Arrests begin. Summary executions. Houses burned as punishment. Leaders, real or imagined, are broken on the wheel, hanged, or sent to the galleys. The revolt is crushed, its brief fire extinguished in blood and terror. The grainier sail will be rebuilt, its walls thicker, its guards more numerous. The gabelle isn't abolished, it's reinforced. Your desperate gamble seems to have failed. The salt remains taxed. The king remains absolute. The weight settles back, heavier than before. Was it worth it? The broken bodies in the square suggest not. The mainstream fact is brutal. Most salt tax revolts failed spectacularly in their immediate goal. The monarchy, with its professional army and centralized power, was simply too strong against localized peasant fury. Yet, something lingers. Not victory, but a shift. The myth of the king's benevolent authority is cracked. The shared experience of rebellion, however brief and bloody, forges bonds between villages that feudal isolation had prevented. The stories are told, whispered in fields and taverns for generations. The night the salt warehouse fell, the humiliation of the gabblers. It becomes folklore, a testament to the limits of endurance. The state may have won the battle, but the idea that the salt tax was monstrous, that resisting it was justified, takes root. It's a seed planted in blood and brine. Historians debate the long-term impact. Did these repeated, failed revolts slowly erode the legitimacy of the monarchy? Did they contribute to the tinderbox that would explode in 1789? Or were they just tragic footnotes, crushed embers in the grand sweep of history? The connection is indirect, but undeniable. The revolt of the saltless taught the peasants of France a terrible lesson. The king's power relied on force, not divine right, and even the most basic need could become a rallying cry against tyranny. The taste of rebellion, like the salt that sparked it, is sharp and unforgettable. It doesn't vanish, it waits. You bury your pitchfork, tend your wounds, and watch the rebuilt granny. The gabelle remains. But the next time the pressure builds, the dam might not hold. The king controls the salt, but he no longer controls the fear. He has created something far more dangerous, righteous rage. And rage, once ignited, is harder to extinguish than a salt fire. Section 12. The acrid smoke of the crushed salt revolt still stings your eyes, the taste of defeat as bitter as unseasoned gruel. But shift your gaze. The damp fields of France blur, replaced by the vast, heaving grey expanse of the Atlantic. The air isn't filled with angry shouts, but with the groan of timber, the snap of canvas, and the rhythmic slosh of waves against a wooden hull. The familiar ache in your muscles isn't from tilling soil, but from hauling lines, scaling rigging, and the constant, exhausting roll of the ship. You're no longer Jacques the rebel peasant. You're Thomas, pressed into service aboard His Majesty's ship Victory, or the Santissima Trinidad, or the Soleil Royal. Pick your floating fortress. And down in the reeking, cramped hold, beneath the waterline, lies the true source of the Navy's power. Not just the cannons, but mountains of salt. Salt is the silent admiral, the unseen crew member without whom the fleet founders. Your ability to fire broadside, to endure storms, to conquer oceans, hinges entirely on its preservative magic. Feel the oppressive dampness. Everything sweats, the walls, the decks, your own skin under the coarse wool uniform. The air is thick with the smell of tar, bilge water, mildew, unwashed bodies, and salt beef. Always salt beef. It's the iron ration, the relentless staple. Imagine the scene at mealtime. The cook's mate dips a ladle into a giant barrel of stew, fishing out chunks of dark, leathery meat swimming in greasy, salty broth. You receive your portion in a wooden trencher. The beef is so hard you could sole your shoes with it. You gnaw, you suck, you soften it in the brine. It tastes of salt and hardship, a monotonous anchor to reality. The mainstream historical fact is visceral and non-negotiable. Navies from the 15th to the 19th centuries depended utterly on salt-preserved provisions. Ships embarking on voyages lasting months, sometimes years, carried thousands of pounds of salted beef, pork, fish, and butter. Without salt, the meat would putrefy within weeks, condemning the crew to starvation, scurvy, and mutiny long before they sighted an enemy sail. Nelson's victories, Magellan's circumnavigation, the Spanish Armada's ambitions, all floated on a sea of brine. Your strength to haul the mainsail comes from sodium extracted from that leathery beef hours, days, even weeks after it was packed. The process was industrial slaughter meets alchemy. Picture the shore establishments, vast slaughterhouses near major ports like Portsmouth, Plymouth, or Brest. Cattle and pigs, driven from distant pastures, meet their end in a cacophony of bellows and squeals. Butchers work with brutal efficiency. The meat is cut into specific joints, then packed tightly into massive barrels. Now comes the salt, coarse, grey, poured in layers, tons of it, packing every crevice. More meat, more salt. The barrels are sealed, the brine working its slow, desiccating magic. A quirky, grimly practical tidbit emerges from naval logs. Sailors distrusted meat from barrels marked with a single large X, denoting Navy Board provisions. They believed it was inferior, perhaps older or from sicker animals. Instead, they prized barrels marked with numerous small XS, believing this indicated better quality, even though it likely just meant more diligent, or bored, dockyard workers. Superstition met sodium chloride. Sailors also developed bizarre methods to make the salt beef palatable, like soaking chunks in seawater overnight to draw out some salt, often making it tougher, or pounding it with a marlinspike before cooking. Desperation breeds culinary innovation? Hardly. It breeds endurance. Flavor it with brine. But salt wasn't just for beef. Fish, cod, especially, from the Grand Banks, was salted and dried into near-indestructible planks called stockfish. Butter was heavily salted and packed into firkins. Even the ship's biscuits, the infamous hardtack, were baked rock-hard and stored near salt, benefiting from its moisture-absorbing properties, though weevils didn't seem to mind. The sheer scale of salt consumption was staggering. A first-rate ship of the line like Nelson's Victory, with a crew of over 800, might carry tens of thousands of pounds of salt meat alone on a long commission. Securing reliable, massive salt supplies was as crucial as securing timber or cannons. Navies drove salt production, creating boomtowns near salt pans and mines. Your ability to fire that carronade relied on miners in Cheshire or rakers on the coast of Portugal. Historians still argue fiercely about the health impact of this heavily salted diet on sailors. We know scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, was the true killer, but did the high sodium intake contribute to other ailments, hypertension, kidney problems, or exacerbate dehydration in tropical climates? Was the notorious sailor's edema, swelling of limbs, partly due to salt imbalance? Naval surgeons' records are full of descriptions of ailments, but pinpointing salt as a specific culprit amidst rampant malnutrition, poor water, and disease is complex. Did the salt that preserved their lives also slowly poison them? The debate rolls on, as persistent as the ocean swell. One thing's certain, without salt, they wouldn't have lived long enough to get sick. Life aboard is a constant battle against decay. Decay of food, of the ship itself, of morale. Salt is your primary weapon against the thirst. You see its importance in the strict punishments for stealing from the provisions, flogging around the fleet, or worse. The salt beef barrel is sacrosanct. When storms rage for weeks, delaying port calls, that monotonous, salty slop is all that stands between the crew and mutinous despair. You dream of fresh bread, green vegetables, water that doesn't taste of wood and tar. But you gnaw your salt beef, swallow the brine, and find the strength to reef the topsail in a gale. Salt enables the endurance, the long blockades, the global reach. The Spanish galleons laden with Peruvian silver were hunted by English ships sustained by Cheshire salt. Napoleon's ambitions to invade Britain founded partly on the Royal Navy's ability to stay at sea, month after month, blockading French ports, a feat impossible without mountains of salted provisions. The salt that preserved the peasant's ham in France also preserved the power of the very state that taxed him. The irony is as thick as ship's biscuit. So, as you stand your watch, the salt spray stinging your face, the taste of brine forever on your lips, look down into the dark hold. That's where the real power lies. Not just in the gunpowder, but in the countless barrels of salt-preserved meat and fish. They are the metabolic engine of empire. The craving that sparked revolts on land is the disciplined fuel of dominion at sea. You are a cog in a vast, floating machine powered by salt. The enemy might have courage, wind, or luck, but you have endurance packed in brine. The ocean is your battlefield, and salt is your most vital ammunition. Next broadside, load the guns, and pass the salt beef. Victory, it seems, tastes suspiciously like old leather soaked in the sea. Section 13. The taste of salt beef still lingers, a greasy ghost on your tongue, but the heaving deck of the warship dissolves. Now, the air smells different. Pine resin, wood smoke, and the damp earth of a new world. The rigid naval discipline gives way to a different tension, the crackling energy of rebellion. You're not Thomas the pressed sailor anymore. You're Samuel, a colonist in Massachusetts Bay. The year is 1774. The King's soldiers patrol Boston, their red coats glaring against the drab buildings. But your resentment isn't just about tea taxes or distant parliaments. It's about something far more basic, far more personal. The salt cellar on your rough-hewn table. Because London, in its infinite wisdom, has decided to control that too. The craving that fueled navies now fuels revolution. Salt isn't just seasoning. It's the spark in the colonial tinderbox. Feel the frustration simmering. You need salt. Winter is coming to New England, sharp and unforgiving. Your farm's harvest, pumpkins, beans, the precious meat from your slaughtered hog, needs preserving. Without salt, it rots. Without salt, your family starves. But the British Crown, locked in a global struggle with France and desperate for revenue, sees the colonies as a piggy bank. And salt? Salt is easy to tax. The mainstream historical fact is infuriatingly clear. Parliament passed laws like the Salt Act of 1775, part of the wider restraining acts, explicitly designed to restrict the American colonies' access to salt. They banned the importation of salt from anywhere except Britain and its other colonies, like the Turks and Caicos salt pans, slapped heavy duties on it, and even tried to control local salt production. Why? To cripple colonial fisheries, a major industry reliant on salt for preserving cod, and to force colonists to pay inflated prices, filling royal coffers. Your survival, your livelihood, is held hostage for pennies in London's purse. Sound familiar? It's the gabelle reborn across the Atlantic. The taste of tyranny, it seems, is universally salty. Imagine the scene along the New England coast. You see neighbors trying desperately to make their own salt. They haul seawater in barrels, laboriously boiling it down in huge iron kettles over roaring fires. It's back-breaking work, fuel-intensive, and yields pitiful amounts of grey, bitter salt. The smoke stings your eyes, the steam soaks your clothes, and the result is barely enough for a fraction of what you need. It feels like a cruel joke. You need tons, not ounces. Enter the smugglers. They become heroes. Fast sloops, built for evasion, slip into hidden coves under cover of darkness, laden with salt from Dutch St. Eustatius, French Martinique, or even Portuguese traders willing to defy British blockades. The risk is enormous. British revenue cutters prowl the coast. Their cannons a constant threat. Getting caught means confiscation of your cargo, your ship, and imprisonment. But the reward? Keeping communities alive. Here's a quirky, desperate tidbit. Colonists got incredibly inventive with smuggling. Salt was hidden in false-bottomed wagons disguised as hay carts. It was packed inside hollowed-out logs floated down rivers. Some even hid salt in coffins during mock funerals, parading it past unsuspecting or bribed customs officers. Think about the symbolism, burying salt to save lives. It was defiance disguised as death. The British response is heavy-handed, predictable. They tighten the blockade. They seize more ships. They impose harsher penalties. They even destroy salt-making equipment along the coast. Each crackdown is another log on the fire of colonial resentment. Committees of correspondence spread the news: salt seized in Salem. Fishermen idle in Marblehead for lack of salt. Families facing winter without provisions. It's not just an economic hardship, it's a visceral threat to survival. The phrase "no taxation without representation" takes on a new, urgent dimension when the tax threatens your children's winter meals. Historians still argue fiercely about how critical the salt issue was compared to other grievances like the Stamp Act or the Tea Act. Was it a primary driver, or just one log on the bonfire? Did it resonate more deeply in specific regions, like fishing communities, than others? The debate is nuanced. Some scholars point to fiery pamphlets and local resolutions specifically condemning salt restrictions as evidence of its profound impact. Others argue it was subsumed within the broader cry for economic liberty. Was salt the hidden catalyst, or just another symptom? The archives offer passionate complaints, but quantifying its precise revolutionary weight remains contentious. One thing's undeniable: it turned everyday survival into an act of resistance. You feel the shift. That communal pot of stew at the town meeting tastes bland without enough salt, but the conversation is fiery. The shared struggle, hauling seawater, hiding contraband, facing down customs officers, forges bonds. The local militia drilling on the green isn't just practicing musket drills, they're protecting potential salt drops. Controlling salt becomes symbolic of controlling life itself. When Paul Revere makes his famous ride in April 1775, shouting about the British marching, it's not just about seizing weapons in Concord. It's about a government that would starve you into submission, that would deny you the basic mineral of life. The shot heard round the world echoes, but it was preceded by years of quieter, saltier defiance. The scrape of the smuggler's oar, the hiss of the evaporating kettle, the whispered exchange of contraband crystals. So, as you shoulder your musket, a hunting weapon turned instrument of liberty, the weight feels familiar. It's the weight of necessity, the weight of defiance learned hauling salt barrels under moonlight. The British regulars in their neat lines might have discipline and training. But you have something else, the desperate knowledge of what happens when salt is denied. You fight not just for political ideals, but for the right to preserve your hog, to keep your fishing boat working, to simply live without begging permission for a mineral. The craving that built empires and fueled navies is now tearing one apart. The king controls the seas, but he can't control every hidden cove, every determined colonist evaporating seawater in their backyard. The taste of revolution isn't gunpowder. It's the sharp, clean, defiant tang of smuggled salt. You load your musket, the coarse grains of stolen powder echoing the precious crystals you fought for. The struggle for independence isn't just about tea or taxes. It's about survival, seasoned with rebellion. Fire when ready, and make sure your salt pork ration is secure. Section 14. The sharp tang of smuggled salt and gunpowder from the colonial rebellion fades, replaced by a different, colder bitterness. The air now carries the metallic scent of snow, the groan of overburdened wagons, and the desperate, hollow coughs of dying men. You are no longer Samuel the colonial militiaman. You are Pierre, a conscript in Napoleon Bonaparte's Grande Army. The year is 1812. You stagger through the endless, frozen wastes of Russia, not towards glory, but towards annihilation. Your boots are rags, your belly is a cavern, and your once proud uniform hangs like a shroud. And deep within your depleted body, a familiar, insidious weakness creeps. A weakness not just of hunger, but of salt famine. Napoleon, the master strategist, has waged war not just on nations, but on the very mineral that sustains life. His continental system, designed to starve Britain, is starving you. Feel the crushing weight of the retreat. Smell the sickly-sweet stench of gangrene, the acrid smoke of burning supply wagons, the terrifying emptiness of the Russian steppe. You left Moscow a conqueror. You flee a broken ghost. Food is scarce, frozen horseflesh gnawed raw, moldy crusts scavenged from abandoned villages. But worse than the lack of calories is the lack of salt. Sweat pours from you during brief, frantic skirmishes with Cossack horsemen. The brutal cold saps your electrolytes. Every bodily function leaks precious sodium. Without replenishment, the weakness sets in, deeper, more fundamental than hunger. Your muscles cramp violently, locking in agonizing spasms. Your thoughts blur, decisions slow. Coordination fails. You stumble over nothing. Your blood pressure plummets, making you dizzy, faint. You become a liability, stumbling towards the rear, easy prey for the cold or the pursuing lances. The mainstream historical fact is stark and often overshadowed by the epic scale of the disaster. Napoleon's continental system, 1806 to 1814, which blockaded Europe against British trade, caused catastrophic salt shortages across the continent. Britain retaliated with its own naval blockade, strangling the import of salt, a vital British export, into Napoleon's empire. The emperor, obsessed with crushing British commerce, inadvertently crippled his own people and his armies. Your collapse in the snow isn't just from cold or bullets. It's from sodium deficiency engineered by grand strategy gone wrong. Imagine the scene back in France, even before the Russian catastrophe. Coastal salt pans, once bustling, fall silent under the British blockade. Prices for the dwindling stocks soar. Preserving the autumn harvest becomes a luxury few can afford. Fish rot in barrels for lack of salt. Cattle, unable to be salted for winter, are slaughtered early, flooding markets briefly before scarcity sets in. Disease spreads, not just from malnutrition, but from weakened bodies unable to fight infection due to electrolyte imbalance. People grow listless, their skin taking on a peculiar grayish pallor. The gabelle, that old monster, might be gone, abolished in 1790 during the Revolution, but a new, more insidious salt famine grips the land. Here's a quirky, desperate tidbit born of this famine. People resorted to burning salt-rich marsh grasses or even specific types of seaweed, collecting the salty ash, called silica or black salt, to use as a bitter, barely effective substitute. Some chronicles even whisper of people licking the salt-encrusted walls of abandoned cellars or, in a grotesque echo of Egypt, grinding up mummies imported from Egypt, a bizarre 19th century fad, hoping the natron within could be used. Think of the irony, licking walls or crushing the dead for salt while Napoleon dreams of continental domination. Survival makes scavengers of everyone. Napoleon's Russian campaign was the famine concentrated. The vast army marched east through salt-starved lands. Resupply lines, stretched over 1,000 miles, couldn't possibly carry enough salt to preserve sufficient meat or replenish the soldiers' massive losses through sweat and exertion. The punishing marches, the battles, the freezing retreat, each step drained vital sodium reserves that couldn't be replaced. Historians still argue fiercely about the relative contribution of salt deficiency to the collapse of the Grande Army. Was it a major factor alongside cold, starvation, typhus, and Russian tactics? Or was it a minor, albeit real, contributor amplified by the larger disaster? Medical records from the time are sparse and primitive. Symptoms described: weakness, apathy, cramps, edema, match severe sodium deficiency, but could also stem from myriad other causes in that hellish retreat. Was the salt famine a primary killer? Or did it simply make men more susceptible to the cold, disease, and bullets? The debate simmers in military history journals, a grim footnote to one of history's greatest military disasters. One thing certain, men who might have endured the cold with adequate salt collapsed and died because they lacked it. The consequences ripple far beyond the frozen corpses littering the road back from Moscow. The salt famine cripples Napoleon's empire from within. Home front morale plummets as families struggle to preserve food and face illness. Industries relying on salt, leather tanning, soap making, textile dyeing, falter. The economic damage rivals the military losses. Napoleon, the architect of his own blockade, finds his grip on Europe loosening not just from external enemies, but from the internal decay caused by a lack of simple crystals. The man who sought to control continents couldn't control the basic chemistry of his soldiers' bodies. The taste of defeat isn't just ashes. It's the absence of salt, the hollow void where vitality should be. So, as you stumble, Pierre, your vision blurring, the Cossack cries growing closer, you don't think of Austerlitz or Jena. You think of the coarse grey salt you took for granted back in your village. You think of the taste of properly salted soup, the strength it gave you for a day's labor. The craving that drove ancient hunters, built empires, and fueled revolutions is now the silent saboteur of the greatest army Europe had ever seen. Napoleon conquered nations, but he forgot the fundamental mineral that conquers decay and sustains life. His ambition outstripped biology. The Grande Army wasn't just defeated by winter or the Russians. It was defeated by the invisible, essential absence of salt. The Emperor's reach exceeded his sodium grasp. You collapse into the snow, the cold of final embrace. The last thing you taste is the metallic tang of blood, not salt. The world fades, not with a bang, but with a whimper of electrolyte-starved cells. Salt, the humble preserver, became the unseen executioner of an empire. The White Death on the Russian snows had many fathers, but one was a profound, strategic lack of white crystals. Section 15. The frozen silence of the Russian snows thaws into the oppressive, humid heat of the Indian coastline. The desperate weakness of salt starvation fades, replaced by a different kind of exhaustion, the deep, weary ache of colonial subjugation. You are no longer Pierre, the dying conscript. You are Raj, a villager in British India. The year is 1930. The air hangs heavy, thick with the scent of dust, spices, cattle dung, and simmering resentment. You watch your children grow thin not from outright famine, but from the slow, grinding poverty enforced by distant rulers. And one of the sharpest symbols of that injustice? The salt in your meager meal. It's not just seasoning, it's a crime. The British Raj, like Pharaohs, Venetian doges, and French kings before them, understands. Control the salt, control the people. Feel the weight of the law. The British Salt Act of 1882 isn't just a tax, it's a stranglehold. It grants the colonial government a complete monopoly on salt production and sale. Making your own salt from the vast, freely available seawater. Illegal. Buying salt from anyone but the official, government-run shops. Illegal. The salt is heavily taxed, its price artificially inflated to fill colonial coffers. For you, a landless laborer or a small farmer, the cost is crippling. A family might spend weeks' worth of earnings just on the salt needed to preserve vegetables through the monsoon or add essential minerals to a diet of rice and lentils. The mainstream historical fact is stark and deeply personal. This tax wasn't just revenue. It was a daily humiliation, a reminder that even the most basic element of life belonged to the empire. Your sweat, pouring into the fields under the Indian sun, leaks sodium you can't afford to replace. The craving is biological. The prohibition is political. It's tyranny distilled into a white crystal. Then, a ripple of hope. News travels, slow but sure, like monsoon clouds gathering on the horizon. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Bapu, has a plan. Not bombs, not bullets, but salt. Simple, defiant salt. He announces he will march 240 miles from his Sabarmati ashram to the coastal village of Dandi. And there, on the beach, he will break the law. He will pick up a lump of natural sea salt. It's a gesture so small, so fundamental, it's revolutionary genius. The march isn't just a protest. It's a pilgrimage, a physical manifestation of the journey from submission to self-respect. You hear the call. Thousands do. The Salt March begins. Picture the scene. Gandhi, a small, thin man leaning on a bamboo staff, sets off on March 12, 1930. He walks. Slowly, deliberately. Villagers line the route, offering water, simple food, reverence. The crowd swells with every mile. Peasants, lawyers, students, merchants, people from every caste and creed. The air vibrates with chants of Vande Mataram, and the rhythmic thud of thousands of feet on dusty roads. The world's press follows, captivated. The British scoff, then grow uneasy. How do you arrest a man for picking up salt? How do you stop an idea whose time has come, walking on blistered feet? Here's a quirky, deeply human tidbit. Along the route, villagers devised ingenious ways to show support without immediately breaking the law. They offered Gandhi seawater in tiny vials, symbolizing the source of the salt he sought. Others swept the path meticulously before him, not just as respect, but as a symbolic cleansing of the land corrupted by the salt tax. Think about it, sweeping dust as an act of preparation for liberation. The mundane becomes revolutionary. After 24 days, Gandhi reaches Dandi. The morning of April 6th dawns bright and hot. He wades into the shallows. The crowd holds its breath. He bends down, his hand trembling slightly from age or emotion, and scoops up a lump of muddy salt crusted with sand. He raises it. A roar erupts from the thousands gathered, a sound of pure, unleashed defiance. The law is broken. The spell is shattered. The mainstream fact explodes into action. Gandhi's act is the signal. Across India, millions follow suit. They flock to the coast, evaporating seawater in pans under the sun. They dig up salt from natural deposits. They openly sell and buy untaxed salt. It's a tsunami of civil disobedience, all centered on this humble mineral. The British prisons overflow. Gandhi is arrested, but the movement only grows stronger. Salt, the symbol of oppression, becomes the weapon of liberation. The British response is brutal. Police lathi charge unarmed crowds gathered at salt pans. Protesters are beaten, imprisoned, some killed. But the violence only highlights the moral bankruptcy of the Raj. The world watches, horrified. Historians still argue fiercely about the precise strategic brilliance of choosing salt. Was it primarily a brilliant symbolic act, leveraging a universally felt grievance? Or was it also a shrewd economic tactic, directly attacking a key revenue stream and logistical pillar of British control? Did Gandhi foresee the global media spectacle it would become, or was its resonance a happy accident? The debate swirls, as complex as the man himself. Was salt the perfect target, or simply the most visible one? Regardless, its impact was undeniable. The salt satyagraha didn't win independence overnight, but it transformed the struggle. It proved the power of mass, non-violent resistance. It unified a fragmented nation. It broke the psychological hold of the empire. So, as you stand on the fringes of a coastal crowd months later, watching your neighbors boil seawater in defiance, you feel it. Not fear, but power. The power of the collective. The power of refusing to accept the unacceptable. You scoop your own pan of brine, feeling the sun's heat, the salt's sharp promise. The taste isn't just sodium chloride. It's the taste of dignity, of Swaraj, self-rule. The craving that empires exploited for millennia is now turned against them. The British control the guns, the jails, the laws. But they cannot control the ocean. They cannot control the sun. They cannot control the fundamental human need for salt, nor the spirit that rises when that need is denied. Gandhi didn't just pick up salt at Dandi. He picked up the hopes of millions and showed them their own strength. The march may have ended, but the journey continues. One defiant grain of salt at a time. The empire built on salt trembles. The taste of freedom is salty, sweaty, and utterly intoxicating. Pass the pan. It's time to evaporate some tyranny. Section 16. The defiant roar of the Dandi beach crowd fades, replaced by a different, earth-shaking sound, the relentless crunch-grind clang of industrial machinery. The sun's heat evaporating brine gives way to the scorching heat of coal furnaces and the sharp tang of steam. You're no longer Raj, evaporating salt in a clay pot. You're a worker, nameless, grimy, standing at the edge of a monstrous pit gouged into the earth. Welcome to the Cheshire salt field, or perhaps Wieliczka in Poland, or the vast underground labyrinths beneath Detroit. The year is the late 19th century, bleeding into the 20th. The age of scarcity, of salt as white gold, is ending with a mechanical roar. Machines are eating the earth, and what they vomit forth is mountains of cheap, abundant salt. The precious crystal that toppled kings and fueled empires is becoming ordinary. Industrialization hasn't just shifted salt production. It's flooded your world with it, drowning ancient economies in a briny deluge. Feel the vibration through your boots. Giant steam-powered shovels, like iron dinosaurs, bite into layers of rock salt, their jaws scooping tons in a single gulp. Conveyor belts rattle endlessly, carrying broken white rock towards crushers that reduce it to manageable chunks. The air is thick with dust, salt dust, coating your skin, your hair, your lungs, making every breath taste metallic and harsh. The rhythmic pounding of stamps and the scream of saws cutting massive salt blocks create a deafening symphony of extraction. Down below, in solution mines, powerful pumps force water down boreholes, dissolving ancient salt deposits into brine, which is then sucked back up to the surface to be boiled dry in vast, hissing evaporating pans heated by roaring furnaces. The mainstream historical fact is transformative. The Industrial Revolution mechanized salt production on an unprecedented scale. Traditional coastal salt pans and labor-intensive mining couldn't compete. Output exploded. In the 19th century alone, global salt production likely increased tenfold. Salt ceased to be a luxury or a strategic choke point. It became a bulk commodity, as cheap and ubiquitous as coal. Your world is being seasoned by the machine. The impact is seismic. Remember those treacherous salt highways, bandit-haunted paths where salt traded ounce for ounce like silver? Obsolete. Overnight, wagon routes collapse. The intricate Venetian monopoly, crushed under the weight of cheap Cheshire rock salt flooding European markets. The brutal gabelle, economically unsustainable when salt can be mined cheaply inland and smuggled easily. Ancient salt towns built on evaporating seawater wither. New industrial cities rise near salt deposits and coal fields. Liverpool booms partly because of Cheshire salt. Detroit thrives thanks to its underground salt beds supporting chemical industries. The price plummets. Suddenly, preserving food isn't a desperate struggle against winter, it's routine. Every farmer, every household, can afford sacks of it. The biological imperative is met, not through perilous journeys or violent revolt, but through the relentless, impersonal grind of gears and pistons. Here's a quirky, slightly unsettling tidbit. The sheer volume of cheap salt led to bizarre industrial experiments. Some Victorian factories tried using salt as a building material, mixing it with tar or other binders to create salt bricks for cheap construction. Predictably, they dissolved in the first heavy rain, leaving behind sticky, briny messes. Other entrepreneurs, overwhelmed by mountains of salt byproduct from chemical works, reportedly dumped it onto roads as a primitive and highly corrosive de-icer years before rock salt became standard. Imagine ruining your carriage wheels just to melt a puddle. Industrial abundance bred industrial absurdity. But this flood of salt isn't just about cheaper pickles. It enables entirely new industries. Cheap salt is the bedrock of the modern chemical revolution. It's not just sodium chloride anymore. It's the raw material for a cascade of transformations. Through the Solvay process, developed in the 1860s, salt brine is converted into soda ash, sodium carbonate, essential for making glass, soap, paper, and textiles. Chlorine, extracted from salt, bleaches cotton, purifies water, and becomes the basis for plastics like PVC. Caustic soda, sodium hydroxide, another derivative, is crucial for everything from aluminum production to drain cleaner. The humble salt crystal fragments into the very building blocks of the modern world. Your light bulb's glass, your soap, your PVC pipes, your purified tap water, all trace their lineage back to those grimy industrial salt works. Historians still argue fiercely about the social cost of this industrial salt boom versus its benefits. Yes, salt became cheap and abundant, ending centuries of scarcity-driven suffering. But what about the workers in those mines and factories? Lung diseases from salt dust, a condition sometimes called salt miner's phthisis, horrific accidents with heavy machinery, dangerous chemical exposures in processing plants. Were these the hidden price paid for universal access? Was the shift from artisanal panning to industrial mining a net gain for humanity when measured in human suffering? The debate rumbles on, as persistent as the crushers in the pit. Progress, it seems, often tastes like dust and diesel. Life changes. You no longer hoard salt like treasure. You buy it by the sack from the general store, piled carelessly next to nails and flour. Preserving food shifts from a vital survival skill to a seasonal chore. The cultural weight of salt diminishes. It's no longer a divine preservative, a soldier's pay, a king's ransom, or a revolutionary symbol. It's just salt. A condiment shaker on the dinner table. The profound connection between this crystal and your very survival fades into the background hum of industrial society. The craving is satisfied so easily. It's almost forgotten. The salt that ruled the world is dethroned, not by a king or a rebel, but by a steam shovel and a chemical vat. Power shifts from those who control the salt source to those who control the machines that extract it and the chemical plants that transform it. So, as you stand at the edge of that vast, raw wound in the earth, watching the machines devour the planet's ancient brine, feel the paradox. The mineral that dictated life and death for millennia is now scraped from the ground with casual, brutal efficiency. The struggle, the danger, the immense historical weight, compressed into cheap, white granules poured onto icy roads or fed to livestock. The industrial flood hasn't just made salt abundant. It has diluted its magic, its terror, its power. The age of salt scarcity is buried under mountains of mechanically extracted crystal. The world is preserved, bleached, and built on cheap salt. The empire of sodium chloride enters its democratic, industrialized, slightly mundane phase. Next stop? The shaker on your table, and the unintended consequences of having too much of a once precious thing. Past the chips, heavily salted, of course. Abundance has its own flavor. Section 17. That mountain of cheap, industrial salt isn't just piled in warehouses or fed into chemical vats. It spills out, shaping the very land beneath your feet in ways you'd never expect. The relentless grind of the mines fades, replaced by a different rhythm. The rhythmic lowing of thousands of cattle, the crack of whips, the creak of saddle leather, and the thunder of hooves pounding dry earth. You're no longer a factory worker coated in salt dust. You're a dusty cowboy pushing a herd north from Texas towards the railheads of Kansas. The year is 1870. The air smells of sun-baked prairie grass, dust, cattle dung, and something else, something primal, the sharp, irresistible tang of salt. Because the trail you're following, the path carved deep into the continent, wasn't laid by surveyors or generals. It was etched by the hooves of bison, then cattle, driven by a craving as old as life itself. Salt licks aren't just natural features, they're the original GPS coordinates, the signposts that built your highways. Feel the immensity of the land. The Texas plains stretch endlessly under a blistering sky. Your herd, longhorns, wiry and wild-eyed, stretches for miles, a slow-moving river of muscle and horn. Your job? Keep them moving, keep them healthy, get them to market. And the key to that? Salt. Not just for preserving the beef they'll become, but for keeping them alive on the grueling journey. Cattle, like all mammals, crave salt. Their bodies leak sodium through sweat and exertion. Without replenishment, they weaken, sicken, lose weight, become vulnerable to disease. A herd without salt is a herd doomed. The mainstream historical fact is etched on the landscape. The great cattle trails, the Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight-Loving Trail, the Shawnee Trail, followed ancient paths established by millions of migrating bison over millennia. And where did the bison go? To natural salt licks. These were places where mineral-rich water seeped to the surface, creating salty mud or brine pools. Animals instinctively sought them out. Native Americans followed the bison to these licks, hunting them and often establishing camps nearby. Pioneers and explorers used these licks as vital landmarks. Then came the cattle drives. Trail bosses didn't invent routes. They rediscovered them, guided by the same biological imperative that guided the bison. The Chisholm Trail didn't just connect Texas to Kansas. It connected countless generations of salt-seeking animals and humans. Your saddle sores are earned on a path dictated by geology and biology. Imagine the scene at a major salt lick along the trail, Big Bone Lick in Kentucky, or the Great Salt Plain in Oklahoma. The ground is churned into a muddy mess by countless hooves. The air hangs thick with the smell of animals, damp earth, and that sharp, clean mineral scent. Your weary cattle smell it miles away. Their pace quickens, lowing turning into eager bellows. They surge forward, jostling, driven by instinct. You let them go, knowing this stop is crucial. They jostle at the salty mud, licking furiously, their bodies absorbing the vital sodium and chloride. You see the change, lethargy replaced by vigor, dull eyes brightening. It's a biological recharge. Here's a quirky, practical tidbit. Knowing cattle would instinctively seek salt, savvy trail bosses sometimes use salt to train herds. They'd lay down lines of salt leading in the desired direction for the day's drive. The cattle, craving the salt, would naturally follow the trail, making the cowboy's job slightly easier. Think of it, baiting a 1,000-ton herd with a mineral trail. Salt wasn't just a destination. It was a tool for managing the journey itself. A salty breadcrumb trail across the plains. But these natural licks were often spaced far apart. How to sustain the herd between them? Enter the salt wagon, a vital, often cumbersome part of the drive. It carried blocks of rock salt, cheap now, thanks to those distant industrial mines. Cowboys would break off chunks and strategically place them along the route or at planned stopping points. This artificial supplementation kept the herd strong between natural licks, enabling drives over distances the bison never needed to cover in a single migration. The trails became dotted with these artificial salt points, blurring the line between instinct and human management. Historians still argue fiercely about the relative importance of salt licks versus water sources in determining the exact paths of the major cattle trails. Was water the absolute primary factor, with salt licks being welcome bonuses? Or did the location of major licks act as crucial anchor points, dictating the general corridors that trails then followed, seeking water along the way? The debate is granular, examining old maps, pioneer diaries, and geological surveys. Did a trail bend 50 miles west to hit a known lick, or was the bend for a more reliable river crossing? The precise mineral motivation remains contested in academic corrals. Was it thirst or salt craving that truly ruled the hooves? The impact goes beyond the trail. Settlements sprang up where trails crossed rivers or near major salt licks. Trading posts, blacksmiths, saloons, the infrastructure of the frontier clustered along these salty highways. As railroads pushed west, they often followed the established cattle trails, which followed the bison paths, which followed the salt. The iron rails literally laid over the top of millennia-old migration routes defined by mineral need. Your modern interstate highway, slicing across Kansas or Oklahoma, there's a good chance its general corridor was first trodden by bison heading to lick salt from the earth. The craving that built empires also paved your roads. So, as you guide your weary horse alongside the surging herd, the dust coating your throat, you understand the power beneath you. You're not just moving cattle, you're riding the ghost of a million bison, following a map written in brine and instinct. The salt block you chip off the wagon isn't just livestock feed. It's the distilled essence of an ancient biological drive, now harnessed by humans to conquer distance. The industrial flood made salt cheap. The cattle drives made it mobile, weaving it into the continent's sinews. The taste of progress on the frontier isn't just whiskey and dust. It's the sharp tang of the lick, the artificial block, the mineral thread stitching the vast land together, one hoofprint, one railroad tie, one highway mile at a time. The path from primal craving to modern asphalt is shorter than you think. Next stop, Abilene. Mind the salt blocks. Section 18. That dusty trail under hoof and wheel dissolves. The smell of cattle and prairie grass vanishes, replaced by an acrid cocktail of chemicals that bites your nose and coats your throat. The rhythmic lowing of cows fades into the relentless industrial hum, hissing steam, groaning pumps, the metallic clang of pipes under pressure. You're no longer a cowboy. You're a technician, or maybe just a bewildered observer, standing on a gantry overlooking a sprawling chemical plant. The year. Somewhere in the late 19th or early 20th century. Below you, snaking through labyrinths of valves and towering reactors, flows a river not of water, but of concentrated brine. That cheap, industrial salt flooding the world isn't just for roads or seasoning anymore. It's being torn apart, atom by atom, in a violent alchemy that's birthing the modern world. Salt isn't preserving food. It's becoming everything from your soap to your window pane. Feel the controlled chaos. Steam billows from vents. Gauges flicker. The brine, pumped from vast underground deposits or evaporated seawater, flows into monstrous tanks. Here, it meets ammonia and carbon dioxide in a complex, heat-driven dance called the Solvay process. Out the other end comes soda ash, sodium carbonate. It sounds dull. It's anything but. This gritty white powder is the unsung hero of modernity. The mainstream historical fact is transformative. The Solvay process, perfected in the 1860s, revolutionized the production of soda ash. Before this, soda ash came from burning seaweed or leaching wood ash, messy, limited, expensive. Solvay, using salt, limestone, and ammonia, which could be recycled, made it cheap and abundant. Suddenly, glass production explodes. Windows become affordable, letting light into dark homes and factories. Soap, once a luxury, becomes commonplace, fighting grime and disease. Paper manufacturing booms. Textiles like cotton are scoured and bleached efficiently. Your morning shower, your newspaper, the light streaming through your window, all exist thanks to salt ripped apart in reactors like these. It's not magic, it's salty chemistry on an industrial scale. Think of it, the crystal that preserved Egyptian mummies now lets you see clearly through a clean window. Progress has a distinct chemical tang. But the alchemy doesn't stop there. Step into another section of the plant, one buzzing with a different kind of energy. Here, massive vats hold brine subjected to a fierce electric current, electrolysis. Watch as bubbles violently erupt at the electrodes. At one end, poisonous, greenish-yellow chlorine gas fizzes off, captured under hoods. At the other, hydrogen bubbles away, and a solution of caustic soda, sodium hydroxide, forms. Handle this stuff with care. It'll eat through your boots. Chlorine, the gas that chokes soldiers in the trenches, becomes bleach for your clothes, disinfectant for your water supply, and the raw material for plastics like PVC, think pipes, flooring, your shower curtain. Caustic soda. It's essential for making aluminum, refining petroleum, producing rayon fabric, and even processing food. That salt shaker on your table has fragmented into the invisible scaffolding of your entire existence. Here's a quirky, slightly unnerving tidbit. During the frantic early days of electrolysis, some factories reportedly had issues with stray chlorine gas escaping. Workers told tales of greenish-yellow clouds settling over nearby fields, bleaching the color out of flowers and grass in bizarre, patchy patterns. Imagine strolling through a meadow suddenly dotted with ghostly white patches, a silent, chemical hail from the salt-splitting vats next door. Industrial progress with accidental special effects. The scale is mind-boggling. These plants consume salt by the trainload. Cheshire salt feeds British industry. Louisiana salt domes fuel American chemical giants. Salt isn't a commodity. It's a feedstock, as vital as coal or iron ore. The cheap abundance unleashed by steam shovels and mines finds its ultimate purpose here, in this controlled molecular carnage. Historians still argue fiercely about the true catalyst for this chemical leap. Was it primarily driven by entrepreneurial genius like Ernest Solvay's, or was it the availability of cheap salt and electricity that made these processes economically viable? Would the Solvay process have transformed the world if salt was still scarce and expensive, hauled by donkey caravans? Was the chemical revolution fundamentally enabled by the prior industrial salt boom, or was it an independent scientific leap that merely used salt? The debate simmers in academic journals, as complex as the reaction equations plastered on the plant walls. One thing's undeniable: without mountains of cheap salt, the modern world literally dissolves. Life transforms invisibly. You don't just use salt, you live inside its derivatives. The glass in your spectacles, soda ash from salt, the aspirin that kills your headache, involves chlorine chemistry. The synthetic fibers in your clothes often start with caustic soda. The clean water from your tap, treated with chlorine. The car you drive, aluminum parts refined with caustic soda, tires containing chlorine-based chemicals. The salt that seasoned a legionary's bacon now seasons the very fabric of civilization. The craving that drove bison across continents now drives chemical reactions in steel vats. The profound, ancient connection is obscured, fractured into 1,000 industrial applications. Salt hasn't become less important. It's become omnipresent and invisible, woven into the molecular tapestry of modernity. It's the ultimate disappearing act, from prized crystal to dissolved ion to fundamental building block. You don't think about salt when you turn on a light, but the PVC insulation on the wire probably started as brine in a vat. Now that's a shocking thought. So, as you step back from the gantry railing, the chemical symphony vibrating in your bones, the smell of chlorine and steam sharp in your nostrils, understand the shift. The age where salt's value was measured in its wholeness, as a preserver, a currency, a biological necessity, is over. Its power now lies in its destruction. It's reduced, reacted, reborn. The empire of sodium chloride hasn't fallen. It has fragmented and multiplied, its influence more pervasive than ever. The humble crystal has become the invisible architect of your world. The taste of progress isn't just salty. It's bleached, caustic, and synthetically sweet. Next stop: the unintended consequences of turning the planet's ancient brine into bleach and plastic. Past the safety goggles, things might get corrosive. Section 19. The chemical symphony of the plant fades, replaced by a different, more insistent sound. The relentless crunch-splash-slush of tires on treated pavement, the mechanical clank-scrape of a salt spreader truck lumbering down your street. The acrid tang of chlorine gives way to the clean, sharp sting of cold air, and the pervasive, metallic scent of rock salt dissolving into brine. The industrial alchemist is gone. You're just you, bundled against the biting cold of a January morning. Outside your window, the world isn't buried under a silent, treacherous blanket of snow and ice. It's unnervingly, dangerously clear. And the reason? Mountains of that cheap industrial salt, dumped with casual abandon. The crystal that built empires and birthed chemicals is now keeping your winter roads treacherously open, one corrosive sprinkle at a time. Convenience has a salty, slippery taste, and an environmental hangover brewing. Feel the transformation. Last night, the storm roared, swirling snow, howling wind, the world reduced to blurred white chaos. You woke expecting hibernation, a snow day declared. But no. The pre-dawn rumble of the plows shook your windows. Then came the distinctive rattle hiss of the salt truck, scattering a blizzard of white crystals behind it. By dawn, the magic is done. Where there should be pristine, muffled silence, there's wet, slushy asphalt. Your driveway entrance is clear, the main roads are black and wet. It feels like defiance. Against nature. Against friction. The mainstream historical fact is staggering. The use of salt for de-icing exploded after World War II, particularly in North America and colder parts of Europe. Before that, cities stopped. People relied on shovels, sand for traction, and sheer stubbornness. The advent of cheap rock salt, massive dump trucks, and the post-war obsession with uninterrupted automobile traffic created the de-icing industrial complex. Today, the US alone dumps an estimated 10 to 20 million tons of salt on its roads every single winter. That's not seasoning, that's geological scale redistribution. Your ability to drive to work on time rests on a foundation of pulverized ancient seabed. But the mechanism is deviously simple. Salt doesn't melt ice, it lowers the freezing point of water. Sprinkle NaCl crystals on ice, and they start dissolving, forming a thin layer of brine. This brine has a freezing point well below 32 degrees Fahrenheit 0 degrees Celsius, so it prevents new ice from bonding and weakens existing ice, making it easier for tires and plows to break it up. It's chemistry hijacking physics. And it works instantly. Watching ice visibly melt away as the salt hits it feels like wielding elemental power. Here's a quirky, slightly terrifying tidbit. Road salt isn't always pure. To make it cheaper or work better at lower temperatures, it's often mixed with grit, sand, or even, wait for it, beet juice or cheese brine byproducts. That's right, your salty slush might be seasoned with molasses-like goo from sugar beets or the leftover whey from mozzarella production. It helps the salt stick to the road and lowers the freezing point further. So next time you scrape pinkish-brown gunk off your car in winter, it might not just be rust. It could be the ghosts of yesterday's pizza. A bizarre fusion of geology, chemistry, and dairy waste keeping you mobile. Bon appetit to your undercarriage. The convenience is undeniable. Emergency vehicles get through. Commerce doesn't freeze solid. Kids get to school. You get your coffee. But the cost? It's written in the rusty streaks bleeding down your car's paintwork, the crumbling concrete of your garage floor, and the dying trees lining the salted highway. Salt is corrosive. It eats metal. Your car's underbody screams silently with every winter drive. It degrades concrete and asphalt infrastructure, costing billions in repairs, and it devastates ecosystems. The runoff washes into streams, rivers, and lakes, turning freshwater brackish. Aquatic plants and animals adapted to specific salinity levels die off. Birds mistake salt crystals for grit and poison themselves. Trees and shrubs along roadsides absorb the salt through their roots or suffer salt spray, leading to roadside dieback, skeletal branches stark against the winter grey. Your clear road creates a creeping, salty desert beside it. Historians and environmental scientists still argue fiercely about the point of no return, when the cumulative damage from decades of salting becomes effectively irreversible for certain watersheds or soil profiles. Can ecosystems recover if we stopped salting tomorrow? Or have we already salted the earth, quite literally, in ways future generations will curse us for? The debate rages like a winter storm, with no easy answers in sight. Is the convenience worth the slow, silent poisoning of our freshwater reserves? Ask the dead fish. Life becomes a salty paradox. You curse the salt eating your car, yet you demand the roads stay clear. Municipalities face impossible choices: public safety versus environmental ruin. They try alternatives: sand for traction, messy, doesn't melt ice; fancy liquid de-icers, often more expensive and potentially more toxic; heated pavements, prohibitively expensive. But nothing matches rock salt's brutal effectiveness and low upfront cost. So the mountains of salt grow in depots by the highway, waiting for the next storm. The trucks roll out. The crunch splash slush resumes. The cycle repeats. The craving isn't biological this time. It's societal. We crave motion. Uninterrupted commerce. The illusion of control over winter. And we pay for it in rust, crumbling concrete, and poisoned water. The mineral that once preserved life now preserves our frantic, unsustainable pace, at the expense of the environment that sustains us. Irony doesn't get much saltier. So, as you navigate the wet, salty pavement, tires hissing on the brine, spare a thought for the invisible cost. That clear path to the office cuts through a landscape slowly being pickled. The ancient power of salt, harnessed for millennia to preserve, is now deployed in a way that degrades. We haven't conquered winter, we've just dissolved its barriers with corrosive crystals, creating a different kind of hazard. The empire of sodium chloride, having fueled navies and built chemicals, now maintains our asphalt arteries, slowly eating them from within. The taste of modern winter isn't just cold air. It's the metallic tang of runoff, the crumbling edge of a bridge, and the faint, briny sigh of a stressed ecosystem. Drive carefully. The road might be clear, but the future's looking a little corroded. Next puddle might contain a microcosm of the apocalypse. Just add salt. Section 20. The metallic sting of road salt on winter air fades, replaced by a different kind of tension, the quiet hum of a doctor's office. The crunch underfoot isn't snow, but the sterile paper covering the examination table. You're not navigating icy streets, you're navigating conflicting advice. The nurse tightens the blood pressure cuff. It squeezes a physical echo of the invisible pressure building around salt in your modern life. The crystal that once decided if you lived through winter now might be deciding how you live or die. Welcome to the salt paradox, an age of unprecedented abundance where the thing you once craved to survive is now something experts tell you to fear. The scarcity is gone, replaced by a glut hiding in plain sight, and your body is the confused battlefield. Feel the confusion. For millennia, salt was life. You sought it, traded for it, revolted for it. Your biology screams for sodium, nerves firing, muscles contracting, fluids balanced. Without it, you fade, like Napoleon soldiers in the Russian snow. But now, open your kitchen cabinet. Salt is there, cheap and plentiful. Check a nutrition label on that loaf of bread, that jar of pasta sauce, that bag of chips. Sodium chloride lurks everywhere, often in staggering amounts you didn't consciously add. The mainstream historical fact is jarring. As processed food consumption skyrocketed in the mid-20th century, so did average sodium intake. While estimates vary wildly, many modern diets far exceed the World Health Organization's recommendation of less than 2 grams of sodium, about 5 grams of salt, per day. Some studies suggest average intakes are double that or more. The preservative power that fed Roman legions and built empires now saturates your supermarket shelf, invisibly seasoning your existence. The scarcity is over. The overdose has begun. The consequences pulse through the medical world. The link between high sodium intake and hypertension, high blood pressure, is one of the most studied and debated relationships in nutrition. The theory is straightforward. Sodium attracts water. More sodium in your bloodstream means more fluid volume, which means your heart has to pump harder against your artery walls, increasing pressure. Over time, this relentless strain can damage blood vessels, leading to heart attacks, strokes, and kidney disease. Your doctor's frown as the blood pressure gauge reads high isn't just professional concern. It's the ghost of that salty ham, that canned soup, that fast food burger whispering a warning. The very mineral that preserved food for centuries might now be preserving a path to chronic disease. Here's a quirky, unsettling tidbit. Some hyper-competitive athletes and bizarre internet challengers engage in extreme salt-loading contests, consuming tablespoons of pure salt in minutes, chasing a dangerous high or online notoriety. The results? Predictably horrific: violent vomiting, seizures, brain swelling, even death. It's the ultimate perversion, turning a biological necessity into a lethal stunt, proving that even in abundance, salt retains its ancient power to kill, just in a new, absurdly voluntary way. Darwin awards seasoned with literal salt. But the story isn't simple. Your body needs salt. Severe sodium deficiency, hyponatremia, is dangerous too, causing headaches, nausea, confusion, seizures, even coma. Athletes sweating heavily during marathons can literally dilute their blood sodium by drinking too much plain water, a potentially fatal condition. The key, it seems, is balance. And herein lies the fiery debate. Historians and medical researchers still argue fiercely about the universality of the salt hypertension link. Is everyone equally sensitive? Or is there a genetic component, making some people salt sensitive, while others can consume more without significant blood pressure spikes? Are the dangers of moderately high salt intake exaggerated for the general population, focusing blame on salt while ignoring other factors like potassium intake, overall diet quality, stress, or obesity? Some dissenting studies even suggest that very low salt intake might carry its own cardiovascular risks for certain individuals. The debate rages in prestigious journals and furious online forums. Is salt public health enemy number one, or a scapegoat for broader dietary dysfunction? The science is as complex and contested as a medieval theological argument, with your blood pressure as the disputed scripture. Pass the popcorn, lightly salted, of course, and watch the academics duel. Life becomes a minefield of hidden sodium. That healthy salad dressing could be a salt bomb. The light canned soup still packs a punch. Breakfast cereal, often surprisingly salty. Eating out, a gamble where the chef's heavy hand with the salt shaker is the house edge. You try to be mindful. You buy low-sodium versions. You push the salt shaker to the back of the table. But the craving, the ancient biological pull towards that satisfying savory hit, is still there. Your taste buds, bombarded by processed food levels of salt, become desensitized. Normal food tastes bland. Breaking the cycle feels like rewiring your primal instincts. The mineral that ensured your ancestors' survival now complicates your own. The convenience of preserved, processed abundance comes with a hidden, salty tax on your health. The empire of sodium chloride hasn't fallen. It's infiltrated your pantry and your arteries. So, as you leave the doctor's office, the admonition to watch your salt ringing in your ears, you feel the paradox deeply. You live in a world flooded with the very substance that was once worth its weight in silver, yet you're told to ration it within your own body. The fear of scarcity has been replaced by the fear of excess. The craving that built trade routes and fueled revolutions now demands conscious suppression. Salt is no longer a simple crystal. It's a symbol of modern abundance's double edge, enabling unprecedented convenience while posing unprecedented health challenges. The taste of the modern world isn't just salty. It's complicated, measured in milligrams, and fraught with conflicting advice. Next meal. Read the label, savor consciously, and remember, the thing that once decided if civilizations lived or died now quietly shapes your own longevity. Pass the herbs, and maybe just a pinch of perspective. Section 21. That doctor's warning echoes, but step into your kitchen. Open the pantry. Tear open a bag of chips. Pop the lid on soup. Scan the barcode on frozen pizza. You're not adding salt, you're drowning in it. The scarcity is ancient history. Salt's empire didn't collapse. It went invisible, embedding itself in every bite of modern life. The crystal that was once currency now floods your bloodstream not by choice, but by default. You aren't seasoning your food. The food industry is seasoning you. Feel the quiet invasion. Breakfast. That healthy cereal has more sodium per serving than a Roman legionary's salarium. Lunch. The deli meat in your sandwich is brined like a pirate's pork barrel. Dinner. The pasta sauce simmers with salt levels that would make a Venetian salt merchant blush. Even the sweet things, the loaf of bread, the cookie, the yogurt, hide stealthy sodium, a chemical sleight of hand to preserve shelf life, mask cheap ingredients, and hijack your taste buds. The mainstream historical fact is staggering. Since the 1950s, processed food consumption has soared, and with it, sodium intake. Up to 75% of the average Westerner's salt now comes from packaged foods, not the shaker. The preservative power that built empires now builds profit margins. Your body is the occupied territory. Why? Because salt is cheap magic. It inhibits bacterial growth, extending shelf life. It binds water, plumping up chicken breasts so they weigh more. It masks metallic notes from canned goods. And crucially, it addicts. Salt triggers dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. That bliss point. Food scientists in lab coats calculate it down to the milligram, engineering cravings you never signed up for. Your tongue, evolved to seek scarce minerals, is outgunned by algorithms optimizing for moorishness. Here's a quirky, unnerving tidbit. Some food technologists admit off record that reducing salt is like diffusing a bomb. Remove too much, and consumers reject the product as tasteless. But some companies allegedly use psychological tricks, like gradually lowering salt over years, hoping your palate adjusts unnoticed. Others sneak in salt substitutes, potassium chloride, or umami bombs, MSG, yeast extract, to mimic salt's kick while appearing healthier. Think of it, a silent arms race between your taste buds and a food engineer's spreadsheet. Your craving is their commodity, but the plot thickens. Salt's invisibility isn't accidental. Check labels. Sodium lurks under aliases. Monosodium glutamate, MSG, sodium nitrate, in bacon, sodium benzoate, in soda, disodium phosphate, in cheese sauce, all are sodium delivery vehicles. Even sea salt or Himalayan pink salt marketed as artisanal luxuries. Still sodium chloride, with trace minerals that do little to offset the sodium load. The illusion of choice masks a monolithic mineral. Your low-fat salad dressing compensates with salt. Your organic soup? Likely just as salty as the conventional tin. The empire didn't fall, it rebranded. Historians and nutrition scientists still argue fiercely about whether the processed food industry or changing home cooking habits bears greater blame for the salt surge. Did corporations engineer dependency, or did time-pressed families willingly embrace convenience, outsourcing seasoning to factories? The evidence is murky, tangled in post-war advertising, women entering the workforce, and the rise of supermarkets. Was it a corporate conspiracy or a societal trade-off? The debate simmers, as polarized as a bag of salted peanuts. One thing's clear, your kitchen is a battleground where biology meets big food. Life becomes a decoding exercise. You squint at labels, playing sodium detective. That serving size on the chips? Unrealistically small. The reduced sodium soup? Still half your daily limit. Eating out? A minefield where chefs deploy salt like artillery. The craving, deep, ancient, undeniable, wars with the doctor's warning. Your taste buds, dulled by constant bombardment, scream for intensity. Broccoli tastes like cardboard without a salty cheese sauce. A tomato needs a sprinkle to pop. Breaking free feels like quitting an addiction engineered into your DNA. The mineral that ensured your ancestors' survival now hijacks your health in the name of profit and convenience. The paradox is crushing. Abundance has become the trap. So, as you stare at that frozen dinner, the microwave humming like an accomplice, remember, you're not just holding a meal. You're holding the endpoint of salt's millennia-long journey, from scarce life-giver to cheap, invisible additive. The craving that shaped human history now shapes your arteries, 1 hidden milligram at a time. The taste of modernity isn't freedom, it's a brine-soaked cage. Pass the label reader, and maybe an apple. Unprocessed. Section 22. The hidden salt in your pantry feels trivial now. Shift scale. Imagine standing deep beneath the plains of Kansas, surrounded not by earth, but by walls of pure, glistening salt stretching hundreds of feet high. The air is cool, dry, unnervingly still. You're inside a man-made cavern, vast enough to swallow cathedrals, carved into a geological salt dome. This isn't a mine, it's a fortress, a strategic reserve. Because while you fret about milligrams on a label, governments remember salt's older, darker truth. When chaos comes, this humble crystal becomes critical infrastructure. Salt isn't just seasoning, it's silent insurance against apocalypse. Feel the sheer, unnerving emptiness. Your footsteps echo in the cavernous gloom. Headlamps carve weak cones of light into the darkness, reflecting off the crystalline walls. The scale is inhuman. These domes, formed by ancient evaporated seas, are geological vaults. Governments don't just store salt here, they stockpile it. Millions of tons. The mainstream historical fact is chillingly pragmatic. Since the Cold War, nations like the US have maintained vast strategic salt reserves. The US Office of Minerals Policy and Analysis once managed over 2 million tons of salt stockpiled across the country, primarily in these subterranean domes. Why? Because salt is fundamental. In a major war, natural disaster, or societal collapse, functioning roads are lifelines. Salt de-ices them, enabling emergency response, troop movement, supply chains. Without it, winter grinds civilization to a frozen halt. Your survival during the next blizzard depends on plows. The plows depend on salt. The salt depends on these silent, echoing caverns. The craving becomes a calculation of national security. Think beyond roads. Salt is the unglamorous bedrock of sanitation. Water treatment plants rely on chlorine, derived from salt, to kill pathogens. Without it, cholera and typhoid resurface with terrifying speed. Food preservation reverts to a desperate art form. Hospitals need saline solution for FORs, for dialysis, for basic sterilization. The mineral that flavored Pharaohs' fish now underpins public health. A salt shortage isn't just inconvenient, it's a cascading failure. Governments planning for doomsday scenarios know, control salt, control recovery. Lose it, and chaos deepens. Here's a quirky, darkly bureaucratic tidbit. During the Cold War's peak, some salt reserve managers reportedly employed official salt sommeliers, experts tasked not with tasting, but with meticulously monitoring the quality of stockpiled salt. They checked for purity, moisture content, and crystal structure, ensuring it hadn't clumped or degraded over decades underground. Think of it, a government employee with a clipboard and a flashlight, solemnly inspecting a 1-million-ton pile of rock salt, ensuring its readiness for Armageddon. Priorities: salted and stored. But stockpiles age. Policies shift. The focus moves from nuclear winter to cyber attacks, pandemics, or climate-induced supply chain fractures. Historians and policy analysts still argue fiercely about the relevance and scale of modern salt stockpiles. Are these Cold War relics, draining resources better spent elsewhere? Or are they prudent, low-cost insurance against unforeseen catastrophes, especially as climate change makes extreme winter events more common? Does the sheer abundance of salt production globally make strategic reserves obsolete? Or does concentrated production, like specific mines or brine fields, create new, unforeseen vulnerabilities ripe for disruption? The debate simmers in think tanks and emergency management conferences, far from public view. Is it paranoia or preparedness? The salt domes keep their silence. Life feels stable until it doesn't. Remember the panic buying during early COVID? Now imagine a crippling cyber attack on North America's major salt producers during a polar vortex. Mines shut down. Brine fields freeze. Trucks stop rolling. Within days, roads ice over, untreated water flows, hospitals ration saline. The invisible infrastructure dissolves. Your modern abundance reveals its fragility. The salt stockpile isn't just rock, it's societal shock absorption. Governments aren't hoarding salt like feudal lords. They're hedging against the unthinkable, acknowledging that this basic mineral remains a keystone holding up complex systems. The empire of sodium chloride hasn't vanished. It's just buried, waiting. So, as you drive on a clear winter road, remember the darkness beneath Kansas. That mundane grit spread by rumbling trucks connects you to a chain of contingency stretching deep into the earth. The mineral that decided life or death for Roman soldiers now sits in government vaults, a hedge against future collapse. The craving hasn't changed. The scale of the risk has. The taste of security isn't freedom from salt, but the knowledge of vast, hidden reserves, a silent, salty promise that when winter truly bites or chaos descends, the roads might still open. Sleep tight. The salt domes are watching, or at least, sitting there. Very heavily. Section 23. The sterile quiet of the salt dome fades, replaced by the urgent rush of water, but something's wrong. It's not the clean gurgle of a mountain stream. This water carries a metallic tang, a subtle, insidious salinity it shouldn't possess. You stand on the bank of what was once a thriving freshwater creek, maybe near a sprawling suburban highway or downslope from a vast, scarred salt mine. The signs are subtle at first. Fewer frogs croaking. A scum of algae coating rocks in unnatural blooms. Then, undeniable, fish floating belly up, their gills clogged with salt crystals. The ancient preserver has become the silent killer. The cheap salt flooding our roads and pouring from mines carries a hidden invoice, paid not in coin, but in poisoned water and dying ecosystems. Convenience has a corrosive runoff. Feel the disconnect. That satisfying crunch under your winter tires. That clear pavement ensuring your commute. It washes away, grain by dissolved grain, with every thaw, every rain. The salt doesn't vanish. It seeps into the soil, poisoning the roots of oaks and maples lining the road, turning their leaves brown at the edges long before autumn, roadside dieback, a slow, salty strangulation. It flows into storm drains, channels, and ditches, funneling a concentrated brine into streams, rivers, ponds, and lakes. Freshwater ecosystems, evolved over millennia with delicate salinity balances, are suddenly drowning in sodium chloride. The mainstream historical fact is increasingly alarming. Decades of road salting and mining runoff have dramatically increased the salinity of freshwater bodies across North America and Europe. Studies show some urban streams now reach salinity levels approaching 1/3 of seawater during winter thaws. For creatures adapted to near-pure freshwater, it's a toxic shock. The mineral that sustained life now extinguishes it. The mechanism is brutal biology. Salt sucks water out of living cells through osmosis. For freshwater fish, insects, amphibians, and plants, immersion in suddenly salty water is like being stranded in the desert. Their cells dehydrate, shrivel, and fail. Fish gasp at the surface, their delicate kidney functions overwhelmed. Sensitive insect larvae, crucial food sources, die off. Amphibian eggs desiccate before hatching. Native plants wither, unable to absorb water from the salt-laced soil. In their place, salt-tolerant invaders creep in, tough, opportunistic species that further disrupt the fragile balance. Here's a quirky, grimly ironic tidbit. Scientists monitoring salinized streams sometimes find unexpected winners. Brine shrimp and other hardy, salt-loving species typically found in estuaries. These interlopers, tiny relics of ancient seas, find modern road runoff a surprisingly welcoming environment. Think of it, miniature sea monkeys, descendants of primordial oceans, thriving in the toxic aftermath of your clear commute, a bizarre echo of salt's deep past haunting its polluted present. Evolution adapts, but the ecosystem loses. The scale is continental. Vast salt mines, like the one beneath Detroit, pump out billions of gallons of saline wastewater annually, often directly into waterways after minimal treatment. Road salting dumps millions of tons yearly, its cumulative effect building like a slow-motion tidal wave in the watershed. Groundwater, the invisible reservoir feeding wells and springs, isn't immune. Salt plumes seep downward, contaminating aquifers for decades, even centuries. The problem isn't just now, it's the legacy we're baking into the earth. Historians and environmental scientists still argue fiercely about the reversibility of this damage. Can ecosystems recover if we miraculously stopped all salt pollution tomorrow? Or have we crossed critical thresholds in some watersheds, creating permanently altered, impoverished saltwater freshwater systems? Is the damage a temporary spike or a permanent scar? The debate is fraught, complicated by climate change, which can intensify salinization through drought and altered precipitation patterns, and the sheer, grinding inertia of existing salt stocks in soil and water. Are we witnessing the slow salinization of our own freshwater birthright? The data flows in, as murky and concerning as the brine-laced streams. Life downstream suffers unseen. You might not fish that urban creek. You might not notice the missing chorus of spring peepers. But the web phrase. Birds lose insect prey. Predatory fish starve. Biodiversity plummets in these aquatic sacrifice zones. The cost isn't just ecological, it's economic. Treating salt-contaminated drinking water sources requires expensive reverse osmosis or other desalination techniques. Infrastructure corrodes faster. Bridges, pipes, reinforcing bars in concrete, all eaten away by the same brine that melts ice. The cheap de-icer becomes a hidden multi-billion-dollar drain. We melt roads but pickle our future. The craving for winter convenience has become an environmental addiction with brutal withdrawal symptoms. So, as you watch the salt truck rumble past after the next snowstorm, remember the hidden current. That white cascade isn't just clearing your path, it's carrying a silent poison towards the veins of the landscape. The mineral that once decided who lived or died in winter now decides which species thrive in the streams, which trees stand guard by the roadside, and what legacy of salt we leave bubbling in the groundwater. The taste of clear asphalt is complex now, laced with the faint, metallic tang of ecological debt. Next puddle. It's not just water, it's a tiny, salty graveyard, reflecting the sky with a clarity we paid for too dearly. Drive carefully. The road is clear, but the water's crying salt tears. Section 24. The metallic tang of dying streams still lingers, but now you face a different thirst. Stand on the sun-baked coast of Saudi Arabia or Southern California. Taste the air, hot, dry, and heavy with the promise of the sea just beyond reach. Oceans hold 97% of Earth's water, yet you're parched. The irony is salt-crusted. Your ancient craving meets its mirror challenge. Too much salt poisoning freshwater, not enough freshwater for survival. So you turn salt against itself. Welcome to the desalination plant, a cathedral of pipes, pressure, and paradoxical alchemy where seawater becomes survival. Salt's empire strikes back by destroying its own. Feel the industrial hymn. Massive intake pipes suck seawater into the plant's belly. It's pre-treated, filtered, dosed with chemicals to prevent scaling, then forced at bone-crushing pressure, imagine 60 times the pressure in your car tire, through semi-permeable membranes thinner than human skin. This is reverse osmosis. Push salt water against a barrier with holes so tiny only water molecules squeeze through, leaving concentrated brine and salt ions behind. What emerges is startlingly pure fresh water, while the rejected brine, twice as salty as the ocean, gets pumped back to sea. The mainstream historical fact is staggering. Over 16,000 desalination plants now operate globally, producing 95 million cubic meters of fresh water daily. That's enough to fill 38,000 Olympic pools. Every single day. Places like Israel get over 80% of their drinking water this way. The technology born from naval needs, submarines, ships, now quenches cities. The very element that threatened life in streams becomes its lifeline by the coast. Salt giveth, and salt taketh away, after extreme pressure. But the cost is steep. Energy. Desalination is a power-hungry beast. Running those massive pumps and creating that pressure consumes vast electricity, often from fossil fuels. The brine discharge? A viscous, super salty cocktail potentially laced with pre-treatment chemicals, devastating local marine ecosystems where it's dumped. You solve freshwater scarcity by potentially creating salty dead zones offshore. Progress tastes like expensive electricity and warm brine. Here's a quirky, sci-fi tinged tidbit. Researchers are exploring biomimicry, trying to replicate the mangrove tree's root system or the tilapia fish's gills, natural desalinators that work on passive gradients, not brute force. Others tinker with forward osmosis, using sugary solutions to pull water through membranes with less energy. The wildest fringe? Projects harvesting the minute electrical potential generated when fresh water meets saltwater, osmotic power, to power desalination itself. Imagine the sea desalinating itself using its own salty gradient. Salt becoming its own undoing, sustainably. Poetic, if it ever escapes the lab. Meanwhile, inland, another salty revolution brews. Open your phone. Its lithium-ion battery is brilliant but problematic, rare, flammable, ethically murky to mine. The solution might be bubbling away in, well, salt. Sodium-ion batteries are rising. Sodium, salt's key component, is absurdly abundant. Remember those mountains of cheap NaCl? The chemistry is similar to lithium-ion. Sodium ions shuttle between electrodes during charging and discharging. The mainstream promise? Cheaper, safer, less fire risk, potentially more sustainable grid-scale storage for renewable energy. Picture warehouse-sized racks of salt-based batteries soaking up solar power by day, powering cities by night. Salt isn't just preserving food anymore. It could preserve the sun's energy. From Roman rations to renewable resilience, not bad for a humble crystal. Historians and energy scientists still argue fiercely about whether sodium-ion batteries are the future or just a niche player. Can they ever match lithium's energy density for sleek phones and long-range EVs? Or will they find their true calling as the sturdy, affordable workhorses stabilizing power grids flooded with intermittent wind and solar? Is this salt's next world-changing act, or just a supporting role? The debate charges on, as volatile as a battery test lab. One thing's clear, the mineral that powered human bodies now aims to power our homes. Pass the electrons, hold the fire hazard. Life balances on a salty knife edge. You watch the diesel plant hum, turning ocean into tap water at an energy cost that makes environmentalists wince. You read about sodium batteries promising a greener grid, knowing they're still clunkier than their lithium cousins. Salt offers solutions wrapped in new problems. It's the ultimate shapeshifter, life-giver, life-taker, preserver, polluter, and now, potential power source and freshwater savior. The craving remains constant. Our mastery of its consequences is perpetually under construction. We dammed rivers. Now we dam the sea's salinity. We mined coal. Now we mine salt for electrons. The empire adapts. So, as you sip desalinated water in a drought-stricken city, or ponder your next phone upgrade, remember salt's journey. That same ionic bond that fired the nerve impulses of prehistoric hunters now might store the energy lighting your home. The mineral that carved trade routes through deserts now carves fresh water from oceans. The taste of the future is complex, a blend of technological brine, lingering environmental guilt, and the sharp, hopeful tang of innovation. Salt ruled the past. It poisoned the present. Can it now sustain the future? The experiment's running. Check the pressure gauges, and maybe invest in a salt battery company, just in case. Next stop, the final grain. Section 25. That hum of the desalination plant, the buzz of the sodium-ion battery lab, they fade into a profound quiet. The frantic energy of salt's journey, hunted, taxed, revolted over, mined, spread, hidden, stockpiled, and desalinated, settles. You stand, figuratively, on a vast, silent shore. Not the briny coast, but the shore of understanding. Look back. The entire, improbable arc of human history shimmers, refracted through countless tiny crystals. From the first hominin tasting salty mud to the engineer monitoring a brine outflow pipe, the thread is unbroken. Salt didn't just accompany our story. It scripted crucial scenes, whispered stage directions, and sometimes shoved the actors violently across the stage. The craving was biological. The consequences shaped empires, economies, and ecosystems. The humble mineral that decided who lived through winter now determines if coastal cities survive climate change. The circle feels impossibly vast, yet contained within a single grain. Feel the weight of it dissolve. The tension, the desperate hunt, the crushing tax, the righteous revolt, the industrial roar, the hidden glut, the environmental toll, it ebbs. You're not Jacques facing the gabelle, or Thomas chewing salt beef, or Raj evaporating brine in defiance. You're just you. Safe. Warm. Perhaps lying in the quiet dark, the soft hum of a fan the only sound. The immense, often brutal, narrative of salt contracts to the simple shaker on your kitchen table. It's almost absurd. This unassuming container holds the distilled essence of millennia of struggle, power, and ingenuity. The mainstream historical fact feels grounding now. Salt played a pivotal role in human evolution and societal development precisely because it is biologically non-negotiable. Our nerves fire, our muscles contract, our very cells maintain balance, because sodium ions flow. That fundamental chemistry, shared with every twitching insect and swimming fish, bound us to this mineral irrevocably. We didn't choose salt. Salt chose us. A quirky, final tidbit. Scientists studying ancient salt deposits sometimes find incredibly well-preserved organisms, brine shrimp, algae, even ancient microbes, trapped for millions of years within the crystals themselves, tiny time capsules sealed in sodium chloride. Think of them, microscopic voyagers from epochs unimaginable, preserved by the very substance whose history we've just traversed. Salt doesn't just preserve ham, it preserves whispers of deep time itself. The path wasn't linear. We moved from instinctive craving to strategic control, from scarcity-induced conflict to abundance-fueled complacency, then to the jarring realization that abundance itself creates new perils. We weaponized salt's preservative power for conquest and its absence for blockades. We turned it into currency, then into an invisible additive, then into an environmental toxin, and now, perhaps, into a tool for sustainable energy and freshwater salvation. The wheel turns. Historians, scientists, and philosophers still argue fiercely about the ultimate trajectory. Is salt's story one of human triumph over a biological imperative? Or is it a cautionary tale of unintended consequences, where solving one problem, scarcity, creates others, health crises, pollution? Will desalination and salt-based batteries represent a sustainable harnessing of this ancient power, or just new chapters in our complicated, often destructive, dance with necessity? The debate is open, vast, and fundamentally human. We are arguing, still, about the meaning of a crystal. Some things never change. The urgency softens. The sharp edges of the narrative blur. Salt's journey mirrors our own, driven by fundamental needs, marked by ingenuity and error, striving for balance in a complex world. The empires rose and fell, the taxes were imposed and repealed, the machines roared and fell silent, but the craving remained. Constant. The salt in your tears, your sweat, your blood. It's the same salt that seasoned Pharaohs' fish, paid the Roman legionary, fueled Gandhi's march, and now courses through the desalination plant's veins. You are connected, not just to other humans across time, but to the bison seeking the lick, the fish dying in the salinized stream, the microbe trapped in the crystal. It's a chain of being forged in brine. So, let the images drift now, like crystals settling in calm brine. See the ancient hunter, weary, tasting life in the mud. See the sweating trader on the mountain path, his donkey burdened with white gold. See the defiant peasant, clutching illegal salt like a weapon. See the legionary, marching on roads built for salt, paid in it. See the Venetian galley, heavy with monopoly. See the frozen soldier in Russia, dying for its lack. See Gandhi, bending on the beach, picking up freedom. See the factory worker, coated in dust, feeding the chemical revolution. See the salt truck rumbling down your street, poisoning the stream to clear the road. See the vast, silent dome beneath Kansas, waiting for doomsday. See the shimmering membrane in the diesel plant, making the sea yield fresh water. See the battery engineer, hoping sodium powers tomorrow. All these moments, swirling, connected by the invisible thread of a simple, vital compound. Sodium, chloride, salt. The immense sweep of time, the clash of empires, the silent struggles of billions. It all condenses now, gently, like dew forming. That frantic energy, the desperate hunt, the roar of machines, the sharp tang of rebellion. It all softens, receding like a tide on a vast, calm beach. Feel the quiet deepen around you. The fan's hum is a lullaby, a soft, constant whisper against the silence. Your breath slows, matching its rhythm. In, out. Like the gentle lap of waves on a shore smoothed by millennia. The weight of history, the pharaohs, the legions, the kings, the revolutions, feels lighter now, almost translucent. It happened. It mattered. But here, in this quiet space, it's also finished. Resting. Picture the salt itself. Not as mountains in mines or tons on roads, but as individual grains. Tiny, perfect crystals. Each one a universe of order, formed under pressure and time, reflecting light in a billion facets. Imagine holding one, impossibly small, on your fingertip. It carries the echo of ancient oceans, the memory of tears shed in joy and sorrow, the ghost of sweat from countless brows, the essence of the sea breeze. It's a fragment of stardust, really. Essential. Humble. Eternal. The struggles it sparked were ours, born of our need, our ingenuity, our flaws. The salt just was, and is. The craving that drove the story is quiet now, satisfied, not by conquest or industry, but by the simple, profound peace of this moment. You are safe. You are warm. The world outside, with its complex dance of salt and water, power and need, continues. But here, now, it's distant, soft. Let the images fade, the marching feet, the clanging factories, the shimmering desalination pipes. Let them blur into gentle colors, like dusk settling over a landscape. Blue of ancient seas, white of sun-baked salt pans, gray of stone roads, gold of stored sunlight in batteries, all merging into a soft, velvety darkness. Feel your body relax, heavy and warm against the bedding. The salt in your blood hums quietly, maintaining the delicate balance that lets you rest. It's a silent guardian, a constant companion through every beat of your heart, every dream that forms in the quiet. There's no struggle here, no need, just stillness. Deep, enveloping stillness. The vast story of salt, of humanity itself, settles into a gentle hush. It's over. It's complete. And you are here. Perfectly present. Perfectly at peace. Drift now. Let the quiet carry you. Deeper. Softer. Into the calm, dark embrace of rest. Where no salt is needed. Only the quiet rhythm of your own being. Slowing, slowing, slowing. End of script. Sweet dreams.